Welcome to a Legalbytes presentation of the Karen Read murder trial. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel we make sense of the law one bite at a time. If you want more on the background of the Karen Read case, check out our video on it linked in the description below. But otherwise, you be the jury. Did Karen Read murder her Boston PD boyfriend John O'Keefe, or is she being framed by local police who Read says are actually responsible for O'Keefe's death? Tell us what you think. But in the process, the one rule is don't be a dingus. Remember, everyone comes from their own perspective and opinion, and everyone comes to conclusions at their own pace. Agree or disagree, but always respectfully. Okay, let's get into it. All right, you guys. Hello, and welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Afternoon in Massachusetts. They are back from the site visit that they went on. So we heard earlier from the witness, Katie McLaughlin. We saw the rest of her direct. We saw her cross. We saw her redirect and her recross. And then actually one thing that we did miss, that I missed, was there was a little bit of argument outside the presence of the jury by the defense about those photos that Alan Jackson was arguing that was, from their perspective, not a violation of the Rule 14 disclosure rule. In other words, saying that if they had evidence, they needed to turn it over. He said we didn't violate it because we were not intending to admit it into evidence for the purposes of evidence. What we were intending to use those was for impeachment purposes only. And when you do that for impeachment purposes only, you don't have to provide that to the other side. So I didn't actually see the full argument because I was doing some background, some behind the scenes kind of stuff. And yes, Tib, defense is proffer regarding the pics. So yes, thank you for pointing that out as well. I probably will be talking about it on the recap because we didn't catch it on the morning stream. I would like to get to the live testimony now, but if you guys want to go back and see, I'm just letting you know that does exist. So folks that do want to see that, any of the other, like the main trial streams that you can see this case on, that's a good place to go for it. But I'm going to watch it in full after all of this, so that I can hopefully put that into a recap, before we move on to day 5. So we're kind of just running with today and sort of working with the flexibility that we possibly can use, with this crazy trial schedule. That's not really a trial schedule anymore. Just because, thanks so much for the super chat. Don't forget to like on your way in. Thank you so much for the reminder. If you guys are enjoying these streams, please do like them. Hitting the like button is the easiest thing that you can do. And it really is like the most helpful thing that you can do because it helps to sort of push this out to more people. So folks take notice of it. And it's just super helpful for the channel overall. So thank you so much. Alrighty, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get right into it. We had no warning. Luckily I had the stream up. And I suddenly heard noises while we were doing the members only live stream, and suddenly I saw Judge Bev. So here we are. Oh, and also Nov A42, thank you so much for the super chat. I just got caught up from your recaps, and before we hop in, I have a question. How many times, if any, has the prosecutor, Mr. What If Any, said what if any on, or some variation thereof, if any, today? I don't know the count yet, so I will know after the main streams have finished processing. After they close out, YouTube does a whole processing thing, and so once that happens, then the AI generators will be able to pick up the entire transcript, and I'll be able to copy paste it into a document and then do a search. That's how I do it. There are probably some ways to get it more in real time. I haven't taken the time to look into whether, like, how we can go about that. I would love to get it in real time. That would be great. But so far, as of the end of day 3, 280 times. So today is going to be quite a bit more. And I take it from like Court TV and all these other streams because they don't have commentary. So me reading off things like this and talking about the what if any's doesn't add to the count. So, okay. Anyway, thanks so much for the super chat. All right. And we've got Jess the MD with us. Welcome, welcome, Jess. Very
Thank
happy to have you
you.
back with us. So I have heard something about that this might be another paramedic. So maybe we'll get some more medical testimony. So we'll get your thoughts on that as always. All right, folks, let's get into it. As always, questions in the chat, I'll save them if I can't answer them right away, or if it's not a good time to answer them right away. And otherwise, we're gonna pause for commentary and get caught up on the recaps as usual, or on the recesses as usual. Words are things, right?
Words are hard.
And also do check out Jess the MD. Her YouTube channel is awesome. There are some links already in the chat. We're gonna get that in the description below as well. Go check her out for sure. Like her stuff, subscribe to her channel. It's great. You'll learn all kinds of medical stuff.
All kinds of fun stuff, watching TV shows while we're at it.
Exactly. Best way to do it, right? It's hiding your vegetables in the sweets.
Totally.
All righty. Let's get to the testimony.
So with that, Mr. Lally, do you have a witness for us?
Yeah, sure. The Commonwealth will call Mr. Gregory Woodbury to the stand.
Gregory Woodbury. Another Canton Fire Department guy.
Step up to the witness stand, please. Face that clerk and the jury. You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now we're hearing to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I did. Thank you. Please take the seat.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Greg Woodbury, Woodbury.
And what do you do for work, sir?
Lieutenant paramedic on the Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire Department?
About 24 years now.
How long have you had the rank of lieutenant within the Canton Fire Department?
That's been 8 years now.
Now, prior to working with Canton Fire Department, what, if any, other work did you have within that same sort of field?
Prior to being on Canton Fire, I was an EMT paramedic in the North Shore area.
And if you could just, with regard to your working as a paramedic and a firefighter, specifically as far as being a paramedic, what, if any, sort of specialized training did you receive in regard to, or certifications did you receive in regard to being a paramedic?
So after I got my EMT, when I went to paramedic school, I went to Northeastern University. It was a 1-year full-time program.
And following you successfully completed that program, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there any sort of continuing educational component or recertification component in regard to your paramedic certification?
Yeah, every 2 years, paramedics have to recertify. We're required to get so many hours of continuing education to recertify every 2 years.
If I could turn your attention to the date of January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022. Were you working with the Canton Fire Department on that day?
Yes.
And what kind of shift were you working on that occasion, if you recall?
It was a 24-hour shift.
And 24-hour shift within the Canton Fire Department is what to what?
It's 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day.
Now, turning your attention to the 29th, at what point do you sort of get up and start to begin your day at the fire station?
So a normal day, sorry, was that my beginning of the shift you're talking about, or the end of the shift? Okay, so the second part of the shift. Normally we get up at 6 for the officers, but I got up a little earlier then because we had the snowstorm coming in. So I had to make sure everything was shoveled. I think I got about maybe 5, check the apron of the area in front of the station, and make sure the walkways were clear.
And when you got up to check that, what, if anything, did you?
It had been snowing. There was blizzard type conditions coming in. So it was a decent level of snowfall there. Let me see, maybe 2-3 inches on the ground at that time.
And as far as with reference to that, what, if anything, did you do to?
I think we can move quickly through this part of it.
Yeah.
The cleaning the apron.
I wasn't getting to that
Finally. Yes, let's move through this. Let's bust through this because we don't need to know these details.
My
Thank you.
goodness.
Okay.
As far as that particular date or that shift, how were you assigned within the department?
I was lieutenant on engine 4.
And with respect to that, at some point shortly after 6 a.m., did you receive a dispatch to a call?
A call for a person in the snow.
And did you respond to that call, sir?
Yes, I did.
And you were assigned to the engine, is that correct?
Correct.
Who, if anyone else, was assigned to the engine that day with you on that shift?
So we had Caden McLaughlin and Frank Walsh were my 2 engine crew.
And in addition to yourself and your engine, what if
Yep.
any other sort of vehicles or apparatuses?
Ambulance 1 also responded with us. So that was Tony Flamati, Matt Kelly, and Tim Nuttall had also hopped on the ambulance. He was coming in for the shift in the morning, came in early to beat the storm.
And do you recall where the call was in regards to what the address was?
I don't remember the address offhand, but it was not that far away in the district.
And when you arrived in the engine, when you first arrived on scene, as you were arriving on scene, what, if anything, did you sort of see as upon your arrival?
So the police were already there. We were approaching the scene. I could see several people off to the side in the yard doing something. So we went to investigate that.
You say off to the side, was that to your left, to your right, or something?
So the way I was approaching the street, it was on the left-hand side.
And when you indicate you see some group of people, is that correct?
Yeah, there was a few people around. I don't remember exactly how many or what they were doing.
And when you start to make your way over there, what, if any, when you arrive on scene,
Yep.
what is sort of the first thing you do?
So we went to evaluate the patient. So, I believe someone had started CPR prior to us getting there. So we went to continue that.
When you say someone had started CPR prior to you,
I don't remember the particular individual that was doing it as we arrived.
my only question, sir, so it's someone outside of your department, correct?
Yeah.
And do you know if it was one of the police officers or someone else?
I don't remember.
Now, obviously, you're dispatched in response to an unresponsive male, correct?
Yes.
And at the time that you're arriving on scene, you say you see sort of a cluster of people. Were you able to see that unresponsive male at that point?
Not in the vehicle, not until I exited the vehicle.
And at some point, much later or subsequently, did you come to learn the identity of the unresponsive male or the patient that you were involved in?
Afterwards, they told me yes. At the time, I did not know.
And what did you learn his name to be subsequently?
I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous and blanking right now.
Was it Mr. John O'Keefe?
Yes, correct.
And when you first came over to where Mr. O'Keefe was on the ground, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
What kind of position was his body in when you first observed?
He was lying supine on the ground, like on his back. He was parallel to the street, about 8 feet away from the snowbank.
And in reference to that, as far as the snow was concerned, what, if any snow did you observe on or around where you were?
He was covered with snow, and there was snow around the area.
And so from a treatment of Mr. O'Keefe as a patient, what is sort of the first thing that you did or?
We started CPR, or CCR, sorry. Immediately, someone went to go get a board to get him onto that so we can get him onto the stretcher and move him to the ambulance. And then someone else is trying to get the backstory, trying to figure out the scenario that we're dealing with.
If I could just stop you for a moment. So
Yep.
You mentioned CCR, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the difference between CCR versus CPR?
CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So that is when you're helping someone breathe. CCR is when we first get to a scene. They changed the protocols a little while ago, so we don't have to give respirations right away. We can just do compressions. It's a little more effective to get the blood flowing quickly.
That's the first time I've ever heard of CCR. So I'm glad that they explained that. Do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah,
procedure?
so there were some changes to the guidelines, and especially I think part of it, I think it had partially to do with COVID and not doing like mouth to mouth resuscitation on
Oh,
people that were unresponsive. So that might be what he is referring to. I have been admittedly out of the hospital for a while, and so I did not know that CCR is an actual term.
oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Also, Mountain Princess 207, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legalbytes memberships. Once again, very kind and generous. So, Edward Perez, Carolyn Wisser, Tib, Sheena Ford, Smurf Anna, you have now been gifted memberships by Mountain Princess 207. So, welcome or welcome back to Bike Club. Very happy to have you guys here.
Thank you. As far as your involvement in patient care, sort of what
Yep.
was that during that initial phase where Mr. O'Keefe was supine on the ground? What was your involvement in patient care at that point?
I was assisting with the CPR, making sure everyone else was doing their task. As lieutenant, I kind of got to manage the other people and make sure everyone's on target for what they're supposed to be doing.
And during that initial time that you're outside in the area where Mr. O'Keefe is on the ground, what, if any, observations did you make as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe at that time?
Outside on the ground, he was covered in snow. So we're really not doing any sort of secondary survey initially. The primary concern is the primary survey, which is airway, breathing, circulation. He was not breathing. He had no pulse. So our primary concern is to get that going.
And at some point, are you able to get him from the ground to the back of the ambulance?
Yeah, we moved him onto a longboard, then moved him from the longboard onto the stretcher and brought the stretcher over the ambulance and loaded him in there.
You mentioned at some points upon your sort of initial arrival at the patient that different people were tasked with different things. Correct?
Yes.
And someone was tasked with trying to get sort of what you termed a backstory. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why,
Yeah.
why is that important?
So when you have someone unconscious, unresponsive, you want to know when they were last well, the last breathing, last seen, trying to figure out why someone is on the ground. There are different reasons of why they could be there, trying to figure that out. Normally people don't lay down in the snow. So trying to evaluate the reason the person was unconscious.
And so you're able to get him on, Mr. O'Keefe, onto a stretcher into the back of the ambulance, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And fair to say that the lighting in the back of the ambulance is better than it was outside.
correct.
And when you're in the back of the ambulance, are you able to then do or participate in that secondary survey? you were
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah. We started doing a secondary survey after we started getting good compressions going. Someone was working on the intubation, and then one of the procedures is to strip off the clothes and evaluate the person.
And if you recall, how were the clothes removed?
I don't recall exactly which method they used. Typically, we cut them off, but I'm not sure if they did that or they just pulled them off.
And what, if anything, do you recall as to Mr. O'Keefe's clothing and sort of what he was wearing when he was found?
I really wasn't paying attention to it. The primary concern is trying to revive him.
So to that secondary survey, as far as once you're in the back of the ambulance, what, if anything, did you observe as far as injuries on Mr. O'Keefe at that?
He had a hematoma or a bruising. The right eye was very prominent. There was some scratches on the right forearm. Was most of the external injuries we noted.
And now, in addition, so as far as people on scene, there were a number of different firefighters from your
Yes.
department. And you mentioned that the police were on scene when you arrived. Is that correct?
Correct.
So beyond the police and fire, what, if any, other individuals did you observe at some point when you were on scene?
There was some other civilians there. I really wasn't paying attention to them.
Now, with reference to that backstory that you were talking about, at any point in time, either outside of the ambulance or inside of the ambulance, who, if anyone, was tasked by you or anyone else to try and obtain that backstory?
I think Katie McLaughlin was the one that obtained the backstory.
And if you know Was there any other conversation that you were present for between any of your other firefighters and any of those civilians?
That was primarily when she relayed to us the information that she had obtained. We were trying to figure out the scenario of why he was found unconscious, unresponsive.
Let me ask you this way. So as far as arrival at the patient when he's on the ground,
Yep.
Who gets there first? You and the other individuals in the engine, or the firefighters in the ambulance?
We both respond from the same station at the same time. The engine's in the front, the ambulance usually in the rear. So I believe we pulled over, the ambulance pulled over at the same time as us. I believe C5 went as well, which is the captain. He was also responding with us.
Now, as far as the person that Firefighter McLaughlin spoke to, what, if anything, did you know about that person at that time?
At that time, I knew nothing. I knew that it was someone that had been with him. She relayed the information of what she had heard to us.
And the information that Firefighter McLaughlin, without reference to what it was, but the information that Firefighter McLaughlin was able to obtain, did she communicate that to you and the other firefighters in the ambulance?
Yes. Yeah, she came in the ambulance, told us what she had heard.
Interesting. So I do remember that from Katie McLaughlin's testimony that she said that she remembers telling Timothy Nuttall about the "I hit him" comment. And Timothy Nuttall was the first paramedic who testified, and he testified to hearing Karen Reed directly tell him, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him," like in response to a question that he asked. And so, but then on cross-examination, the defense brought up, well, no, but your original testimony was that you heard her say it to some other woman. And it's interesting because it sounds like the statement was relayed to these other guys by Katie McLaughlin. So either they're lying or their memory was kind of just shaped by what she had told him in the moment, and they sort of like reconstructed in their minds of like, this is what she told me in the process of all of this treatment, which is entirely possible. So,
Right.
but
It's with memory, it's like what you remember, what I remember, and then what actually happened.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it sounds like now that I'm hearing multiple people talking about the fact that Katie McLaughlin told this stuff to these other people, you know, it's entire, like, it makes sense to me that they would have developed like basically constructed that memory, because that happens a lot.
Like placed themselves in the situation and the memory of it.
Right. And
Yeah.
and that can be totally convincing, and they might have a very sincere belief about that memory, that they're not lying because they actually believe it. And you know, Keith Tama, or you know, she actually said it. That is possible too. That is possible too. But the thing is, we're looking at this from all the different possible perspectives that are coming up from you know, both sides of this testimony, from direct and from cross-examination. It's very interesting to me how this is starting to look now that we're hearing from more witnesses.
As far as the information that Firefighter McLaughlin provided, did that comport with what you were observing as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe?
Objection.
Sustained. You can lay a foundation if
Now, as far as, again, the injuries that you observed to Mr. O'Keefe in the back of the ambulance were what?
It was the bruising of the right eye and the scratches on the forearm.
And what, if anything, did Firefighter McLaughlin indicate to you had been told to her?
That someone said she had hit him, and he was last seen.
Objection. Move to strike.
sustained, that will be stricken.
That's hearsay.
May we approach on?
Okay.
I think there's a hearsay issue, because it's we've got some issue as to not just Karen Reed making the statement. That's an admission. So her saying, I hit him, like other people reporting to, like, she told me I hit him, that's an admission. So that's different. That's not going to have a hearsay problem. But when other people are relating that to someone else, that person saying she said this, that's a hearsay issue. Unless they are introducing it for some other purpose, like, state of mind or something like that, but it has to actually relate to it. Smurf Anna, what do you think of making objections and not allowing for attorneys to state their grounds on the record? I don't like it. I'm not a fan of the snide bars, when attorneys are grandstanding and they're poking shots at each other. I don't like that. But I much prefer to see things getting on the record much more openly and cleanly. So yeah. Okay. Some other questions here. Diane Clothes. Do we know if the clothes were scratched? That's a really good question. Because if it was by the car, one would think that those scratches they could have come through his clothing then onto his arm. But if he was from inside the house, he ostensibly could have taken off his jacket for that.
Do they have that clothes in evidence? I mean, obviously it probably was cut, right? But you can still see if there's any other damage, like from the vehicle.
I think the hoodie actually was a zip up. So I think that what they said was that they didn't have to cut that off of him. I think if I remember correctly, folks, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, they do have photos of the clothes, and that was how they were able to impeach the first paramedic, because he initially remembered him wearing a heavy coat, and so they showed him a photo of the clothes, and he's like, "Is that a light jacket, light sweatshirt?" He's like, "Yeah." So that's very, very interesting. Smurf Anna, that question was asked this morning, and nothing of note on the clothing. Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you for pointing that out.
That's a really big deal. You
That
can't
is a big
have
deal.
scratches that deep without, like, I would really strongly expect it to damage the clothing to some degree.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, that's why people on
We
motorcycles.
always try and check and make sure that your lunch is here before we take a break. I'm told that it is. So we will take a lunch break. We'll see everybody here ready to start right at 2:00.
Lunch break. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we've got 40 minutes. Well, all right. Okay, so we were about 20 minutes behind. So now we've caught up on that. So we can keep going through questions and stuff, because we've got 40 minutes from now until they come back. I don't know that I want to open up a third stream, because I thought this was the afternoon stream. I thought they would have taken lunch before this point, but okay. We'll keep going. So interesting. But yeah, as what you were saying is that would have been, those kind of gashes would have likely
It
come through his
should have.
clothing, it seems.
Yeah, and I can't think of a single material that would be super resilient to, like, damage like that the skin, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Make it make sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, oh yeah, what I was saying is that's why motorcyclists have, certain types of clothing, like they'll often wear leather and things like that, is to give some added protection specifically for road rash.
Against road rash, yeah.
Because that's just like their other materials are going to get shredded on the road if they have an accident. Interesting. All right, some more questions here. Phantom Split, do you think the prosecution has benefited from trial being streamed? Seems they received feedback of boring viewers and therefore likely boring jurors. They are getting to the point much faster.
Are they though?
I mean, maybe. I mean, that last exchange was more like the judge was like, hey, all right, let's move this along here.
She was probably like, I'm hungry and ready for lunch myself.
Probably. I could see that being the case for sure. DG, does anyone know if it's going to be a full day of testimony today, or is it going to be an early day again today? Well, I think we've gotten that answer. They're taking a lunch break, which means they're planning to settle back in for a bit, and And yeah, so I think it's going to go all the way to 5 p.m., which it seems like when it comes to cutting off for recesses and for the end of the day, this judge is actually very, very meticulous about the time, which is nice. So at least, especially for my purposes, because I'm in a different time zone. So, those later streams, especially when they decide to just go a bit, they decide, when they decide to go just a bit later into the day, I'm like, that's fine. That's cool. I'll be fine. Mads Fold Gas. Are witnesses allowed to be present in the courtroom and listen to the testimony from other witnesses during trial? Typically no, if they have not yet finished their testimony. So if there is supposed to be testimony that is going to be expected from them, or they haven't yet been released after giving some testimony, because maybe they'll be recalled for some reason, then no, they're generally not allowed to be in the courtroom. However, I say that, and I have seen one trial, the Menendez trial back in 1993. They did not invoke the rule. Like, the judge just allowed all of the witnesses to watch all of the testimony and everything else, which to me was absolutely wild. But generally speaking, most courts are going to say no, because they don't want people to be lining up their testimony, or either consciously or subconsciously. Susan Carroll, question: did we really learn anything from him? So far, no.
I feel like that has more to do with the lack of questions from the prosecutor than anything.
Yeah. It's the prosecution has a tendency to be a slow roller in terms of like getting to the meat that's actually on the bone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Marco Palazzo, question: you solved the case. It wasn't road rash, but snow rash. I've never heard of that. Has that ever been a thing? Snow rash?
I mean, it's more like a burn, right? Like very cold things can actually act like a burn on your skin, but that's not what that looked like.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Doctor Who 8675309. What, if any, treats has Indy had today? She has had a few, a few Treatos, but not enough in her opinion. The limit does not exist. Dionysa Jaclo, a morning question for Jess. He was found in the left side of the road. The car light was broken in the right side. Is it possible to have no injuries in the leg/bottom after someone runs you over?
Well, I think we kind of talked about this earlier this morning. If he was crouching, then absolutely, right? But if he was if he was standing, I would not expect there to be zero evidence of injury on his lower extremities. It doesn't make sense. If he's crouching and kind of at an angle where his body gets the brunt of it, sure, absolutely. But I think in that case, it really depends on what his position was, when he was hit.
Interesting. Let's see here. Another one. Noel Leader, thanks for the super chat. Could distended belly be from incorrect aspiration?
I think what this person is asking is more like when he was intubated, if the tube goes instead of going into the trachea, going into the esophagus, yes, that absolutely will distend the belly. I'm not sure what the timeline of your question is, though. Like, incorrect aspiration where?
Okay.
But if we're talking, sorry. If
No.
we're talking the way he was tubed, then yeah, it would definitely distend the belly, and you can see that happening.
Okay. Interesting. HKR, does that mean all witnesses are being held somewhere during testimonies, or is it done by trust? No, they're not being held somewhere. They're agreeing under penalty of perjury that they have not talked to anyone about their testimony. They haven't watched anything. That's basically what that is. So yeah, there's no one, like, there's no guard that is following them around to make sure that they're not doing that. All right. Fella, slice sweet potatoes and dehydrate them. Healthy and pup can have all sorts of Treatos with no weight issues. That is a fantastic idea. Thank you so much for that. Bluebell question: if he was hit by a vehicle, how is it he was laying down on his back with no broken bones in arms and legs? If you fly through the air, you will not land perfectly on your back.
True, true. And again, it comes back to how he was struck. If he was struck, if you're flying through the air that far, I would expect some broken bones. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Baz 80s question: do we know what his cause of death is recorded as? For Jess, how accurate is that going to be without a witness to the incident, if that makes sense?
So I mentioned this before. Pathology is truly a specialty of its own, right? Like every specialist, we have our general medical education, and then we go through to get to be more expert in a very specific subject, right? For pathology, it's this, and specifically even forensic pathology. So they're pretty accurate in when they determine a cause of death. They go through a lot of different things. They do drug testing on like postmortem. They do a lot of things. So I think that even without a witness, you can get a pretty good idea based on broken bones, how they were positioned, all of the things. But I
Okay.
don't think we
Interesting.
have a cause of death recorded, do we? Or at least has it
So
been released?
I don't know. So the medical examiner's report, I haven't actually read it myself, but what was I going to say? But I think what I remember hearing is that as far as the manner of death is concerned, they actually put
Could
like
not be.
unknown cause.
Yeah.
It was not homicide. So that was like interesting. Like they landed on undetermined. And I remember there are 4 different options, right? There's unaliving, which, there's the word that I don't want to use on YouTube because
Mhm.
YouTube doesn't like it. And then there's homicide, there's accident, and then there's undetermined, I think, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that they said undetermined. So they're going to have to explain that. I think, unless the judge ended up, I think that was a topic for motions in limine to see like whether or not they were allowed to talk about it. So
Some news outlets that I'm seeing, like Yahoo News reported that autopsy cause of death was blunt impact injuries to the head and hypothermia. So that, I mean, that huge gash, that laceration on his head, definitely that alone can be a cause of death. Um,
yeah,
Especially if he had, like a hemorrhage, like an epidural hemorrhage. I
yeah.
I think they're gonna interview. They have to have a testimony from the medical examiner, right? So
Yes.
one
Yeah, I
of
think
those.
actually the prosecution has 2 medical examiners on their witness list. I don't know if they'll be calling them both, but at least one of them for sure would be called. Marco Palazzo, what are the chances of someone screaming, I hit him, that the police officer at the scene would not at least detain them? I mean, yeah, or at the very, very, very least, not put that in their report.
Mhm.
That's the thing that really gets me here, is that none of the contemporaneous reporting, either by the paramedics or by the police that were at scene, none of them reported hearing I hit him, that the girlfriend of the man who was found on the ground admitted to hitting him. That's very strange to me, because I feel like that is something that they would definitely take notice of. And especially since Katie McLaughlin testified that, when she heard Karen Reed say that, the police officer that was nearby said, "Wait, what?" So if someone took special notice of it, a police officer, how did that not end up in any of the records? It gets me.
Was there something about that potentially she was saying, "Could I have hit him?" Where the words "I hit" and "him" were there, but just not in that order?
Could be. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I've got to go and get something at the door really quick. Um, so I apologize to leave you hanging for a second. Chat, be nice. All right. I'll be right back. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. That was the food delivery that arrived. So, so where were we? Yeah, just the records. The records are not being a thing is an issue for the prosecution, I think. So, all right, next question here. John Smith, aren't conspiracy theories laughed at as a defense? Would it have been better to say they have zero evidence and maybe he was just killed in a house fight and here is that evidence? Well, the thing about that is the house fight issue, that's third party culprit defense. And so they can't make that argument until they have introduced what Judge Canone has determined to be competent evidence. So she's been kind of strict with the defense in talking about that. So they can't just lead with that. That's something that they can definitely argue at some point later, perhaps. But the other stuff, I don't know. I mean, the other stuff is very helpful to the defense too, to introduce motive for why all of these other individuals would be dishonest. So, I don't know. I mean, to me, like I'm used to both sides making arguments and you decide like what you believe from what they're arguing. And I think that the jury could decide, well, I'm not going with you as far as a conspiracy theory, but I am going with you as far as no reasonable doubt. You know, that they didn't do their job to investigate, that they just don't have enough evidence that I can rely on to actually convict her. I don't know.
I had a thought about this earlier with them not having searched the house. I mean, if there was any of his blood inside the house, that would, I feel like, be damning evidence, right? Like just that
Yes.
alone.
Yeah. And it's very common for criminal cases for the defense to say, look, there were other routes that they could have gone down to investigate. They didn't look into this, they didn't look into that. And I've seen other cases where I'm like, okay, but like they really have done enough. Like they really, like this is pretty convincing. This is pretty damning.
Yeah.
But in a case like this, like that does seem like a pretty big thing. Like you didn't even like walk through the door. You didn't like just nothing. There was just nothing that was interesting to you about the fact that he knew the people that lived at that house.
And he
Like
died
that's
in
just
their house.
yeah. That's it. It is weird. It is weird. Dionysia Jaclo, do they take photos of how they found him? Because so far, all we heard was he was moved pretty fast and the first cop there didn't do it. I don't know. I don't know if they do have photos of exactly how they found him because, when police respond to a scene, they always say their first priority is securing the scene, trying to like, minimize the danger, like that kind of thing, that they're just responding to it. They're not necessarily thinking of gathering evidence for a later trial. And the same thing with paramedics, like their first priority always is going to be patient care. So, I don't think that anyone is going to stop and take photos before they actually jump in to come to the aid of someone, because they're like, well, what if this goes to a trial? I don't think that there were photos of that. That's why there's going to be photos afterwards. There's going to be photos like, of him, during the autopsy and all that kind of stuff. But in the moment as they found him, no, probably not.
Because he was considered alive and in need of emergent intervention, right? Like no one's going to stop and take photos for that.
Yeah. Which I mean, makes sense. And as a member of the public, I appreciate, because I would, if I'm having a problem that needs emergency responses, I would much rather they come and help me with the problem first rather than taking photos of me and then being like, okay, no, let's try to fix this issue.
Can you imagine if someone were to survive an episode like that and then be like, well, they had a worse outcome because we paused to just survey the scene?
Yeah. That's also cause for a potential civil lawsuit for sure. Absolutely. John O'Rourke, thanks for the super chat. Will they have a scene creating expert like the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial? Do you know? So depending on which side, I do have the witness list for both sides. I know that the defense has a number of expert witnesses who are accident reconstructionists. So like accident reconstructionists and expert, they do have one expert in biomedical and mechanical engineering. So that is someone who is definitely going to be probably something similar to the ski the physics ski expert that was one of Gwyneth Paltrow's experts, which was just so fascinating. But they've got one forensic pathologist, one expert in digital forensics who's probably going to testify about the Google searches and celebrate, data extraction from cell phones and things like that. And then they've got 3 that are from ARCCA Inc., which when I looked them up, the individuals that work there they're all like accident reconstructionists. So that's all going to be really interesting. And then let's see here. Then we've got, so with the prosecution's witnesses, they have them divided by police officers and then civilians. So they don't necessarily have them in this particular list that I have. They don't necessarily have them like designated as experts. So I haven't Googled through all 87 people on here. So I don't know exactly what their experts are, but I would imagine both sides would probably have some kind of accident reconstructionist, something along those lines. Alrighty, moving on down the line, trying to grab these questions as we go. We've got some time. Veronica B, why would John be bending over towards the road though, in one shoe, mind you? Yeah, the shoe thing, I'm right there with you on that. The only thing that I can think of is if he bent over because he had dropped his glass, the cocktail glass that he was supposedly holding, or if he fell, or like there's stumbled because he had been drinking. Like that's the only thing that I can think is if he had somehow folded his body towards the ground and then was hit.
Because did he slip? That's something that unless it's like caught on a ring camera or something, we really wouldn't know.
Right. So, okay, moving on down for more questions. I'm sure there's going to be some more here. Sorry about the airtime. Alina Abaddon, could the prosecution be so boring and not putting best effort because they too think there's enough reasonable doubt, but then wouldn't they have offered a deal or thrown out the case? Yeah, I mean, if they have reason to believe that this case is not a good one, then they shouldn't be prosecuting it. So, the assumption should be if they are moving forward with the case, then they do believe in their case, at least to a certain extent, enough to continue on with it. So that's I don't, yeah, I don't, they definitely come across like they don't really care about this trial, or they're reluctant to bring this case. But I don't know that that's actually the case. I don't know. It's such a strange thing to me that a case that's this high profile and this animated is being put on in a way that feels very lackluster. Smurfana, questions for Jess. Isn't one of the first things they drill into your brain, especially in the medical industry, to keep comprehensive notes?
Heck yeah. Documentation is so important. And I'm not a paramedic or an EMT, so I don't know for sure what their exact instruction is in terms of note taking. But when it comes to us, like doctors, nurses, we have to take very, very specific and complete notes, especially in cases especially when it comes to a case like this, obviously in all cases, but when it comes to something that could end up being something used in trial, I mean, you have to make sure that every word that you put in the medical record is accurate and as complete as possible.
Yeah. This is something that I've heard in comments from other folks, that there was someone that was in emergency medical services. There was another one who was in mental health, and they're like, the fact that there are no like records on this means that they don't exist. It's
Yeah.
just that's the idea that we have in our industry is if it wasn't taken down in notes at the time
It didn't
of
happen.
the interaction, didn't happen.
That's absolutely true. We say that all the time. If it's not written down, it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same for me and all of my tasks and things. If I don't write them
Mhm.
down, they're not gonna happen.
Honestly,
Sophie,
something
no,
as
no, go.
simple as if I'm talking to my patients about like ER precautions, like what they need to look for to go to the ER, I have to write that down. Like we talked about this.
Yeah. And generally speaking, like that's the same thing even like with lawyers when you're having especially when you're having like an important conversation, like even just relatively important just to inform them. This is why a lot of communications will be done by email is so that you have a paper trail of it or oftentimes when you have an important conversation whether it's with a client or with opposing counsel, like sometimes you'll have a phone conversation and this is why just, helpful tip for everyone whenever you have an important conversation with anyone over the phone, follow it up with an email. Just send an email saying, "Hey, just want to confirm this is what we talked about, XYZ. I said this, you said that. This is what we agreed to. Let me know, within by the end of the day if any of this is incorrect. Otherwise, I'll assume that all is good." Like that's what you do. And then you've got a record of it. You've got it all on paper. You've got it down and no one can dispute that. So anyway, from Sophie, question: was there ever any dog hair found on his clothing? Is that something they looked for? That could be a pretty big indicator that he did indeed go into the house. So the prosecution does have some kind of a veterinarian on their witness list, who I imagine is probably an expert. Most likely, it makes sense, unless it's like the veterinarian that like helped rehome them or something that rehome the dog.
When you
But
say expert, like an expert witness or
yeah.
an ex okay, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I know that was a question. I know that the defense there at one point was trying to get DNA testing of the dog specifically, like the dog's saliva or something like that. But then I know that there are others who have countered that. They weren't able to get it because the dog was rehomed. But I know that there are others who have countered that if there is like dog saliva on the arm, you can test for that and find out that it's not human. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I've never tried to get anything
Yeah.
like that tested for.
Given all the swabs that they do when they do, like, autopsies, I imagine that that would probably be something that they can do as well. I never saw it when I was rotating through, but I only spent, like, a month with them, so
Yeah. But I mean if also if they did find dog hairs on his jacket, like that also would be indicative. But I do think that if they had, that probably would have been something that the defense team like raised to the media a long time ago and people would be talking about that, I think. So, Ryan Capiello, question: are there any photos of the snow around the house, sidewalk, lawn, not where he was found, the rest of the yard? Occam's razor is not letting me believe the defense's theory without that. Um, of the snow around the house, sidewalk, lawn. I mean, they do have photos of like the full yard. So, you can see the full front yard. I don't know about the side of the house, etc. But you're right. One thing that I do want to see is a comparison of like the snow level underneath him and the snow level that was next to him in the area that was undisturbed by all of the CPR attempts and all that kind of stuff. I would love to see if there was some sort of a measurement taken. I don't know if we're going to get that, but probably the best that we can get is like meteorological findings of how fast the snow fell between certain hours, in Canton, Massachusetts. That might be the best that we can get for that.
my other thought is blood, like blood splatter, where was it? If this potentially happened inside and he was dropped outside from a gash like that on his head, you would see blood spots throughout kind of the path
Mm,
unless they were covering it.
that's true.
Yeah.
Unless they cleaned up after themselves, because that could have been,
True.
something along those lines. I don't know, but just looking at this from multiple perspectives. Cassandra Komar, a shoe and a belt. There was also a belt missing. I haven't heard about that yet. If there also was a belt missing, that's weird. That's even weirder for that to like magically come off.
That would not. It would just not.
Yeah, that would be very strange. Moving on down. Let's see here. Coming down. Oh, Marco Palazzo. I'm coming into this trial blind. Has the prosecution or defense have a theory about the missing shoe? The defense, I think, probably thinks that it came off in the midst of the fight and the dog and all that kind of stuff. I think that's what the defense thinks. I have not heard any explanation from the prosecution, but I kind of would like one. I very much would like one from the prosecution because it doesn't on its own sort of fit the situation. All right. Did Indy steal the shoe? Indy did not steal the shoe. She has never been to Canton, Massachusetts.
Is she a shoe chewer though?
She's actually not. We thankfully, when she was a puppy, she did chew some stuff, as all puppies do, but luckily we had like a decent enough shoe closet that kept her out. So she never reached for it. She did chew mostly Mr. Bites stuff, to be honest with you. And it was kind of a thing for a while. And I remember telling him, I'm like, well, I mean, the lesson is not to put these things within her reach because these are very interesting to her. And that didn't help. He was very mad about it, even more mad after I said that. But
Honestly, same for kids though.
yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, he's learned since then. Especially because now, we've got another cat that has entered our home, and she's very precocious and very sweet and very playful, but she loves to steal like my pens, my eyeliner, and like just like all kinds of things that just there were like 2 days in a row that my eyeliner went missing, and Mr. Bites like told me, he's like, well, I think the lesson that you need to learn is that you need to start putting these items in a different spot. And I was like, I know, it's true.
Yep.
So
yeah, if you don't want it to go missing, you got to put it away.
yeah, exactly. It's like if it's not working the way you're storing it now, you've got to change it because the tendency, and they can't help themselves. So luckily she has not chewed any of our shoes, but she has chewed a brand new Xbox controller.
Ouch.
Luckily she didn't kill it, but it was brand new, so now it had scratches, brand new, which was not fun.
Painful.
She also chewed up a pair of Oakley sunglasses. So yeah, there were a few things that were just painful to go through that I took zero joy in any of that.
Yeah.
Let's see here. ZND Fifth. I had a late start, but who is the second lady on this commentary? Well, so for those of you who have joined us a little late, this is Jess the MD, wonderful doctor who has joined us today, giving us her thoughts on some of the injuries and some of the medical testimony that we've heard so far from paramedics and things like that, giving us a wonderful perspective, because I can only tell you what I think as a human being that, has, some thoughts on things, but is absolutely not trained to talk about these things. But Jess can give us her impressions of stuff as a doctor. I love it.
Yeah, and I'm primary care. I spend all of my time at this point out in the clinic, so much less time in the hospital. Well, no time in the hospital now. But yeah, I have some answers to things.
Whatever answers can be given, right? Because there's only so much that you can tell us based on what's out there, which is also an answer on its own. Because the issues about how much can we conclude are part of the process.
Right. And there's always so much information that is missing in these kind of cases that either slowly comes out or doesn't come out at all, that you're like, oh, if I just had that info, I could give a better answer.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sarah H. question: does the jury get told when a witness is impeached, or do they just put two and two together? I would be a dumb juror. I can't follow these cases without watching your coverage. Yeah, they're not. There's no declaration that they've been impeached or anything like that. It's basically just anytime you sense that the witness has been caught in an oopsie, we can just basically like look at all of those situations and just say impeached. That's basically it. Perry G, is it possible prosecution didn't expect this much of a fight from the defense and weren't as prepared as they should have been? I think that would be the case, maybe a year ago or more, but I think at this point there's been so much around it, and the defense has raised so much hell in hearings and in public publicity on the front steps of the courthouse that it to me would not be an excuse for the prosecution to say, well, we just didn't think that they were going to bring it. Especially, I mean, look, when you are going up against other lawyers in litigation of any kind, the first thing that we would do, when I'm working, in litigation firms, regardless of the practice area that I was in, like the first thing that any of us would do is look up the bar number of our opposing counsel. Because sometimes you can find some very interesting information. First off, the length of the number, if they've been practicing for a long time, if they're a newbie, or if they've got any kind of like issues with the bar that they've run into. There are things like that that can be very, very illuminative as to like who you're dealing with on the opposite side. Also, you can also look up some of the cases that they've been involved in sometimes. And these two attorneys are very well known for their history as being former prosecutors and all that kind of stuff. So there's nothing about either of them that is like hidden information that would suggest that that this would have been an easy case for them to go up against. Carla Barrick, as a former healthcare professional, if you don't write it down as documentation, it didn't happen. Yep. Yeah, we definitely talked about that. For sure.
Yeah.
Courtney Jordan, don't you think witnesses should remember the daughter of witness since they are from such a well-known family? I mean, I think it's more actually tied to the fact that they are in a small town. A small town, went to the same high school. Did they talk about how big the high school was? I don't think they mentioned how many were in like her graduating class. But, I mean, there are plenty of people that went to my high school that I don't know and didn't, so like if we had gone to the same high school and they came up to me and were like, hey, we went to the same high school. We graduated from, Mission Viejo High School at this, at this year, then I would be like, oh, it's nice to meet you,
Yeah.
Because mine was
My
big.
high school, yeah, it was 1,200 people in my graduating class.
That's
No
a
way I
lot.
would know everyone.
That's a lot. I think mine was
Yeah.
like 650 or something like that. And even still, like maybe I had interacted with some people, but don't remember them now. But the fact that also I'm further away from high school now than Katie McLaughlin is. And in fact, earlier today, Mr. Bites pointed out that it's been like 20 years. And I was like, do not
Please don't
tell me that.
remind me.
Do not tell me that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I am old. And he's like, you're not old. We are not old. And I was like, I feel it after this conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are reasons to suggest that she should have remembered. And I think the part of it is just her demeanor suggested that she was
Mhm.
being cagey when she
Evasive.
didn't need to be. Yeah.
Well, and okay, if you've never been in a group setting with the person, if you've, like there are pictures putting her, with her arms around Caitlin. So that part is, I think, what's worse than just, oh, we went to high school together.
Yeah. Exactly. Like being in photos together, like at various events. I mean, and I've got, in back when I used to like really use Facebook a lot more than I do now. I do have photos in groups from like going out at night, with people that were friends of friends that I had gone once, but the description of some of these photos of like the two of them like arm in arm like that, like that's a little different than like, oh, this person is just like someone that I just met tonight.
Mhm. But
Yeah.
then multiple different times, right? Like multiple different occasions.
Mm-hmm.
That gets a
Exactly.
little suspicious.
Yeah, it does. Phantom split. Jess, if doctors and RNs were told by EMTs that victim may have been hit and they did not record it, what would be repercussions? Defense insinuated hospital records do not make mention of this.
I mean, repercussions. If it comes out that that he actually was hit and okay. I feel like it is almost like a medical hearsay kind of thing because I would have to record maybe what I was told.
Mm,
If I wasn't there though to witness it, I can't record that. Does that make sense? So I don't know if there would actually be repercussions because this person is coming in as a trauma and y- you're writing down what information you have, which may be very little. So does that answer the question?
yeah. 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 I think there's a difference between writing it down because he heard it and it's helpful,
Mhm.
and writing it down
Right.
because you'll be responsible if
Exactly.
you don't.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can say it was reported that this person was hit by a car, right? But it's that's a secondary report. That's not me having witnessed anything.
Yeah. 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 Another question here is, let's see here. Oh, did I miss this earlier? Doctor Who, 8675309, given the crop conditions, could the SUV get up to enough speed to do the damage that has been shown? See, that's where we really need some experts to testify as to
Mhm.
like where the car would have started, where it would have ended, what kind of speed she would have had to get up to. Also, with the snow falling, how that would have impacted the speed that she could get up to very quickly. Like how would that have been done? I don't know. I don't know. That one we definitely would need some kind of an expert on that. Running with scissors. What is the prosecution's actual theory of how he was killed?
I don't think they've come out and said anything about that. Have they?
Yeah. I mean, other than the fact that she hit him. That's it. You know, granted, we haven't heard from like the doctors that treated him. We haven't heard from the medical examiner. So I think the medical examiner will testify to like what actually killed him.
Mhm.
Um,
Which reportedly is head injury, right? Blunt force trauma to the head.
yeah. So I mean, I guess it's just like she hit him and then he flew back and hit his head.
Mhm.
I mean, I wonder if they're gonna point to like the fire hydrant that's in that area, maybe. But then why wouldn't there be blood on the fire hydrant
I
if it's
mean,
from a head
yeah.
injury?
Depends on it depends on if he hit it and then immediately fell away. Like
Okay,
blood doesn't necessarily immediately need to spray out, right? Like
that's
there's
true.
that initial hit and then in a, half second he can fall away and there not be blood on the fire hydrant itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fair. That's entirely fair. Rob Inson, thanks so much for the super chat. Is having trouble sleeping and going out to find him at 5/6 a.m. the sign of a guilty conscience? Not necessarily. It could be because you're used to sleeping next to your person. And when you wake up and you realize that they're not there, that like you,
Immediately go
um,
looking for them.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, how many times have folks, you know, had either their, you know, their significant other, their boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, what have you, you
Mhm.
know, they're going out with friends and it's just like them and their friends and you're staying home and they're like, yeah, I'll be back by a certain hour. And they're not back by a certain hour, but you've already gone to sleep and you're tossing and turning like, what is going on? What is happening? That's
Yeah.
entirely possible for anyone. And then going out and searching
Happened to
for
me.
him. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Find him on the couch instead.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They've actually managed to stumble through the door. They just
Right.
didn't get all the
They
way
didn't want to
the
wake
bed.
you or whatever. And so they're like, I'll just stay out here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm definitely woken up at 4 being like, where is he? And he's on the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Elaborate. Can we ask the good doctor if there are contraindications for atropine? The EMT only gave epi via IO, which surprises me. I might need a little bit of explanation on that question.
Wow, it's been a long time since I even thought about atropine. That's more in an emergency setting. So it's yeah, I don't know what I mean, if he was in an arrhythmia, sure, but I don't think he had a pulse that they could feel. So why would they give it? But again, it's been a long time since I went through ACLS, so I don't have a great answer for that. I'm sorry.
Alrighty. Let's see here. Oh, did I missed this earlier perhaps? John O'Rourke, what's Dr. Jess's YouTube channel and what does her content entail? So she
It
is
Jess the MD, and we do a lot of Doctor Reacts on my channel. I put in a few other things in there every so often, kind of informational stuff, but yeah, lots of reactions.
and also if you guys refresh the stream, it is in the description and mods have been putting it up too.
Turning attention back to,
Oh, okay. We have a live feed now. Okay, I'm going to go through and try to save whatever questions we have not gone through. Also, ZND5, thank you so much for gifting 10 Legalbytes memberships. I'm sorry, I usually read them out, but we've got to jump to this real quick. So, but ZND5, thank you so much for gifting more memberships. Very kind and generous of you. And we are going to get right back to it. Okay.
I'm gonna have to jump off here fairly
Okay.
soon.
Yes.
But
Yep.
I'll
Yeah.
just sign
Totally.
off when I gotta leave.
Yeah. Okay. But thank you so much for joining us. And
Yeah,
otherwise,
thanks
folks,
for having me.
do go to her channel, watch her stuff, like her videos, subscribe to her channel. There's a Mountain Princess 207 has put it into the chat, the link to her channel, and it's also in the description below. So go check out Jess the MD for sure. All right.
the treatment of Mr. O'Keefe in the back of the ambulance. Okay?
Yes.
With respect to that, you testified that you don't recall sort of specifically anything as far as clothing for Mr. O'Keefe. Is that correct?
I was not paying attention to the clothing.
And so to that point, what were you paying attention to at that?
Primarily, the big issue was doing the CCR, then to CPR. We're trying to resuscitate the person as best we can. We know with the hypothermic patient, it's very difficult. It's a longer treatment protocol than a typical cardiac arrest because we have to do the CPR for an extended period of time. We have to get the patient warmed up. So the clothing is just quickly removed versus examined or looked at. And the focus was on getting compressions done. Someone was trying to intubate, getting a line started. So that's what we're mainly focused on.
As far as treatment is concerned, what, if any, sort of interplay or intersection is there between a cardiac arrest and a hypothermic patient?
When someone's hypothermic and in a cardiac arrest, we can't declare them dead or passed on until they've been warmed up. A lot of times with hypothermic patients, they can appear to be dead when they're still actually alive. So there has been instances where people have woken up in morgues that were hypothermic when their body warmed up a little bit. So we have to be very cautious, very careful about, treating them as much as we can, as careful as we can. We can't shake them too much, can't move them too much. So it's getting the blood circulating and then starting ventilating after a few minutes.
Back to the CCR, the chest compression
Yep.
that we're talking about. What, if any, sort of, based on your training and experience, what, if any, sort of protocols are? Well, let me ask you this. Were you doing chest compressions throughout the entirety of this interaction with the patient?
No, chest compressions, most people do it for about 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, it's very tiring to do chest compressions, so we swap off every few minutes. So a different person will come in and do the compressions. They'll do it for a little while, go into a different task. Someone else will come in and do compressions.
Is that sort of the protocol that you followed in this instance? with
Yes.
regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, we were rotating her person doing compressions.
And the ambulance at some point leaves the scene and goes to a hospital. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you know what hospital, Mr.?
Good Samaritan Medical Center.
If you could just wait. till
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
the question is asked.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good Samaritan Medical Center.
And did you go along for that ambulance ride?
No, I did not.
And where did you go?
So as the lieutenant on the engine, I stayed with the engine. I detailed my 2 other engine personnel to the ambulance. So they went with the 2 engine personnel, the 2 regular people on the ambulance, as well as an additional person. Timmy Nuttall was the extra person for that one.
And so you take the engine and go with it.
I went back to the station.
And at some point shortly after that, are you called back to the roadway of Fairview Road?
Yes.
And same general area of Fairview Road?
Yes, same address.
And how is it that you get from the station back to Fairview?
So we had struck a box to cover the personnel that we had detailed. That means we send out a page looking for additional people to come in. We had Sam Pock come in. So he was my engine driver, and I was in the lieutenant's seat. We responded back in engine 4.
And the ambulance that had been there on Fairview Road with you previously was at Good Samaritan.
Yes. Yeah. A call like that takes an extended period of time, even at the hospital, to assist them there. So we had to get an ambulance from Station 2.
And if you know who was on that ambulance from Station 2?
That was Jason Becker and Dan Whitley.
Now, with reference to this particular call, what, if anything, was this secondary dispatch with regard to?
So this call was for a Section 12, which is someone in having a psychological issue.
And do you know who that Section 12 was in regard to?
Yeah, this was for Karen Reed.
And at some point, you go back to the scene along with the engine and the second ambulance from Station 2?
Yeah, so the engine got there first. The ambulance coming from another station, so it was a couple extra minutes before they got there.
The thing that I just thought about is the whole Section 12 thing of somebody having a psychological issue. That really calls into question some of the stuff that she's been saying at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are folks that have been talking about how, like, you know, she just was panicking, she was, you know, hysterical, all of this kind of stuff. You know, that's all reasons for why she said these things. And to me, I've always had a hard time just kind of accepting that right off the bat. But as they're saying that this was, she was acting erratically enough that they determined that they should Section 12 her. And this is the second paramedic actually that's mentioned Section 12ing her. That really makes, in my opinion, I think that gives the defense a lot more space to argue that the things that she was saying there were not anything connected to reality.
Yeah. So here in Texas, it's bringing in someone like on a POED. Basically, they're detained because they're not mentally well. And yeah, what people like, when you hear what people say when they're not totally with it, you're right. It brings the defense it gives them points.
Yeah. Allie Foley 82, did they actually Section 12 her though? I don't know if they actually did. I know that there was a call, there was a request to do so, but obviously that's even stronger if they actually did Section 12 her, and not as strong if they didn't. But that's just it's an interesting point. And so I understand a bit more about like why people are very ready to sort of defend those comments.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And when you arrive, who, if anyone else, is sort of on scene on Fairview Road?
The police were still on scene. They had never left. So initially it was me, Sam Pock, and the police. So I went up to try to get the backstory of why we're doing a Section 12 and what was going on.
And at some point, well, when you first arrived, without regard to what was said to you, but who, if anyone, do you speak with to sort of try to gain this information or backstory?
When I got onto the scene, I talked to the police that was there.
Who'd you talk to, sir? The police officer who was there?
Officer, yes. Sorry.
And do you recall specifically who that police officer was?
I really did not pay attention to the individual officer.
And at some point, do you have a conversation, or what, if any, conversation do you have with the patient in this case, the defendant, Ms. Reed?
So it was when we identified Karen Reed as the patient, the ambulance arrived shortly after. We started talking to her and trying to get her into the ambulance. to talk to her further.
And just to be clear for the records, when you say Miss Reed, do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, she's right over there.
That's a record reflect identification of the defendant by the witness?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the defendant, Miss Reed, where is she sort of when you first make contact with her on scene when you come back?
In the general vicinity of where the police cars are.
And what is sort of the purpose of this initial conversation that you're having with Ms. Reed?
For Section 12, that's when someone's made threats to them, harm themselves or others. So I just had to judge her mental ability at the time and if she was a threat to us and how much of a threat she was to herself. So just a quick evaluation, see how her behavior was.
And what, if any, observations did you make of her during your quick conversation?
She appeared very distraught, very upset. Initially just trying to explain the situation to her about going to the hospital with the Section 12, and she was resistant to that.
And so when you say she was resistant to that, what if anything, did she say or do to?
She did not want to go.
Hold on. You cannot talk over each other, and the objection's overruled.
Yeah. Okay.
Please go ahead.
So what was the question again, please? Yeah.
So what, if anything, when you say she was resistant, what, if anything, did she communicate to you or observations did you make in regard to that?
She did not want to go to the hospital, and she didn't think she needed any assistance.
And what, if anything, are you sort of, you mentioned you were explaining sort of the process to her. What, if anything, are you saying in that explanation?
Well, once a Section 12 gets written, it's written by the police. Once it's written, we are required to transport to the hospital. Section 12 means that they believe you're a threat to yourself or others. So you have to get evaluated at the hospital by the hospital staff there to see how mentally stable you are.
Now, at this time of this conversation, what, if anything, did you know as far as the relationship between Ms. Reed and the prior patient, Mr. O'Keefe?
I knew they had a relationship. I wasn't sure if they were married or engaged or what their status was, but I knew she was did have a strong relationship with him.
And in reference to Mr. O'Keefe, during your conversation with Ms. Reed, what, if anything, was she asking or saying in reference to Mr. O'Keefe?
She kept repeating, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" She seemed very concerned about that. We're trying to explain to her that we cannot declare him dead. He's being evaluated. He's being treated. They're trying to treat him the best they can.
And as far as when she's stating these things to you, is this, as far as the sort of tonality of her voice while she's saying these things to you, can you describe that?
She was very up and down. It was a repetitive conversation with her. She's obviously experiencing a lot of different emotions. So just her emotional state was all over the place.
And as far as this sort of second time that you're on scene, about how long period of time are we talking about?
That was about between 15 and 20 minutes.
And as far as your conversation with Ms. Reed, where did she go? Did you stay with her sort of the entire time that she was on scene that second time? Or
because she was resistant, we were trying to get her to voluntarily go. If someone voluntarily goes, even with the section written, they're released a lot quicker. So we're trying to convince her to go, be willing to go with us versus being forced. If at some point we have to actually force her to go against her will, then it's going to be a much longer hospital stay. So our main goal with staying on the scene so long was to try to get her willingly to go. Just makes her experience much better.
And just to be clear, when you say we, who specifically are you from?
It was me, Dan Whitley, Jason Becker were the ones talking to her in the back of the ambulance.
When you clear, sort of when you leave the scene, where is Ms. Reed at that point?
So the ambulance transported her to the Good Samaritan. We also detailed Sam Park as the driver.
So the gentleman who had driven, or the firefighter that had driven you in the engine to the scene that
Yep.
drives the ambulance away.
Yes, correct.
Could you say his name again, please?
Sam Park.
Sam what?
Sam Park.
Spell it, please. The last name.
P-O-C-H is the last name.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have a thought, a question.
Thank you.
With them doing this Section 12 or POED as it is here, under what was it? Just that she was acting erratic? Who said she needs this? You know, because what he's describing, where she's extremely emotional, I think that's really appropriate in the case where it's your significant other that's in, you know, a dire condition. It doesn't make sense to me why they're really harping on this and why that even happened in the first place. You know, was she threatening anyone? It doesn't. You see my question?
Yeah. I mean, it could be because I mean, it sounded like some of the people have testified that she was like screaming some things like more than 10 times, like, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? So maybe
Wouldn't
it
you
could just
that
be,
way?
I mean, yeah, I know it could just be that like the volume of it
Yeah.
spoke to like this is somebody who is starting to get beyond like grief. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I mean, yeah, it I would think that at least to a certain extent it is definitely, you know, appropriate. Oh, but somebody says that she had mentioned self-harm.
Oh, okay. Well, then
That'll do it.
yeah, that will absolutely do it. Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Okay.
Question
So
closed.
there's that. Yeah. And actually now that they mentioned it, I think someone had testified to that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that she had mentioned harming herself. And so yeah, that'll do it real quick.
Yep.
All right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Woodbury, you and I have never met or spoken, correct?
No.
I know you had said you were nervous, so I'm going to try and make
Okay.
this fairly brief,
Thank you.
sir. I just have a couple of areas that I'd like to go
Okay.
to you with. So to your interaction with Karen Reed and what you actually heard from her mouth.
Okay.
That's sort of where I want to concentrate, as opposed to anything that anybody else may have said to you about what they believe she might have said. Okay?
Okay.
And it seems to me that your main interaction with her was not when the initial call came in to respond to, you know, a man who was unresponsive in the snow. It was after you went back to the station in the engine and then came back to the scene for the purposes of the Section 12 that you described. Would that be fair to say?
Correct.
And when you came back to the scene for the Section 12, it's also fair to say that the Section 12 issue was your focus, correct?
Correct.
You had an order in hand, correct?
The police had it and they gave it to us when we got there.
Right. Okay. So you got an order in hand once you got there,
Correct.
which is what you expected to happen, correct?
Yes.
And your focus at that point is, okay, and I don't want to be too, flip, but we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Is that a fair characterization?
That is one way to put it.
And you wanted to do it the easy way.
Yes, correct.
And you wanted to persuade Karen Reed that she should want to do it the easy way, correct?
Yes.
And after some conversation back and forth where she was initially resistant, she eventually agreed, yes, I'll do, not to put words in your mouth or hers, but to the effect of, yes, we'll do this the easy way, correct?
Did get her to agree to transport.
Okay. And with regard to her state of mind, I believe you had testified that she appeared to be very distraught,
Yes, correct.
going through a lot of emotions,
Yes.
grief-stricken,
Oh, that's one of them. Yes.
hysterical at times,
Yes.
raising her voice at times,
Yes.
crying at times.
I didn't see any actual tears, but
That
yeah,
type
of emotional display.
All right. And so in terms of the only commentary that you heard with regard to her feelings or questions regarding John O'Keefe, it was the statements that you heard repetitively over and over and over again. Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead?
That was some of the things she was saying. Yes.
And Your Honor, may we approach sidebar briefly?
Okay. Okay. Interesting. I wonder if he wants to introduce something else here. Let's see if we can fast forward through the sidebar.
All right, I think I have to sign off. Thank
Okay.
you so much for having me.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
yeah, I'll be back.
Thank you for joining
whenever-
us.
Yeah, of course. All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much. And yes,
Thank
once
you.
again, for you guys, if you haven't done so already, please do check out her channel, subscribe to her channel, watch her stuff, like her videos. Wonderful, wonderful content happening over there.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you.
So I
Lieutenant Woodbury.
I think, Ms. Giannetti, I think you need the actual,
Yes. I was going to ask a couple of questions first and then grab it.
but it's right there for when you need it.
Lieutenant Woodbury, on your direct examination,
Mhm.
you testified a bit, and I don't want to block a jury here, I'm sorry. You testified a bit about the injuries that you observed on John O'Keefe when you first arrived at the scene, correct?
Yes,
You testified about the swollen eye,
yes,
and you also testified about the scratch marks that you saw on his forearm, correct?
correct.
I'd like to show you, I'm going to approach in a minute to show you what has been marked M for identification. And when I hand it to you, please keep it to yourself and look at it, and then look up at me when you're done, okay? Having reviewed M for identification, do you recognize what that depicts?
Yes.
What does it depict?
That is Mr. O'Keefe's right arm.
Does that photograph appear to be a fair and accurate representation of the scratch marks that you observed on January 29th of 2022, sir?
Yes.
I would offer that, Your Honor.
Okay. That will be our next exhibit. And again, we'll have to maybe renumber. Counsel, before you leave today, we have to figure out how to keep everything straight.
Understood. And with the court's permission, Your Honor, may I have that published on the screen for the jury?
Yes.
Now, on direct examination, Lieutenant, hang on. Let me just have a moment. Good point. I'm going to try to get out of your way so everybody can see. With regard to the injuries that you described on direct examination, Lieutenant, I believe you would mainly concentrate.
I'm sorry, I need to, please take this down for me. I need to counsel this out.
Oh. They might have some sort of motions in limine about proper ways of displaying these kinds of images. So, yeah. Let me get this real quick. I think we're not quite caught up. So yeah, for those of you who have not seen the scratch marks on the arm yet, that's what we're talking about. That's what Jess the MD was talking about earlier. Okay, let me see if I can just hit live. Okay, now we're all caught up. Let's get some questions here. Hopefully, I know that there are some, I think, that are probably directed towards Jess, and I apologize that we didn't get to them before she left. Okay, let's get these here. Blue Varo, thanks for the super chat. If he was hit by a vehicle, wouldn't there be more damage than just a busted taillight? So I will say that I did see on Twitter some photos of this site visit, and apparently her car was part of the site visit as well. So there was also like some kind of a scratch on the bumper too, I guess, but it's like a small scratch, not like a big dent. I would think that there would be a bigger dent if she had hit a tall 6 foot plus man. So there's questions. There's definitely questions, and you're right. Carolyn, question: did they talk about the footprints between the front door and where he was found? they said that there weren't any discernible footprints like around the area. That's what one of the police officers had testified to. Keep in mind, there also was testimony about active snowfall. So there's that also. Jerry Roth, I was listening while mowing an acre and a half, and I could hear the judge, could hear the person on the stand, but not the prosecutor or the defense's questions at all. Is that just me? No, their microphone at the stand was lower at the beginning. I think that it's gotten better. Maybe it actually got turned on. The defense, generally speaking, has been louder than the prosecution. He just seems to be very soft spoken, doesn't speak directly into the mic like everyone else has been instructed. Jonathan B, can she be convicted of manslaughter, or is it murder or nothing? I think they have still included manslaughter as a lesser included offense. But I should double check that. So grain of salt on that answer. I love pie. Does Mr. Bites know about all this live slander? He knows about it. He knows about it. JBAZ question: could the distended belly be caused from the CPR that Karen Reed performed? Air in his stomach. I wonder if Jess has thoughts on that. I would have a feeling that maybe less so, because she was talking about intubation, where you've got the tube that's going all the way into the lungs, and if they insert it into the wrong tube, then it's going all the way into the stomach. So there's that. I think it's probably harder to do that with actual like mouth to mouth, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm so sorry that we didn't get to that before Jess left. Hyacinth question: how much damage can happen from CPR by human and the Lucas device? I think, well, I know that you can end up with some cracked ribs. That's something that I do remember from being CPR trained. So there's that, but I remember the training always said, like, we'd rather somebody just deal with, we'd rather someone just deal with having some cracked ribs and be alive, than the inverse. Courtney Jordan. Oh, but aside from that, I don't know about the Lucas device. Yeah, again, I'm sorry we didn't get to that before Jess left. Courtney Jordan, do we know the fam's opinions? I feel like they should be upset at the terrible investigation. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know for sure. I know that there's been some people talking about what their opinions are, but I haven't heard enough that was like reliable from the source to really indicate. I've been able to see some facial expressions here and there, but not much. I think we're probably picking up again. Okay. Nope. Still more sidebar. Okay. Well, let's get some more questions here then. Sarah Bahu question: will you make a video about the rules around and process of third-party guilt? Don't know much about it. I don't know if I'll be able to make a video exclusively on that. I don't know. Maybe. Let me take a note on that just to see if that's something that I can make some time for. But between live streams and recaps, that's been keeping me very busy. Okay, hang on. So I'm assuming that you mean, like, you know, the rules around making that kind of a defense and putting that kind of a defense forward. So yeah. So I'll take a look and I'll see if I can do it. If not, I apologize. Courtney Jordan, how is it not a big red flag that no one came outside when all this commotion is happening outside of your house? I mean, I can understand the explanation also being, is the jury being let out? Okay, so maybe they're going to have some arguments outside the presence of the jury. I mean, one of the things, just kind of looking at this from a different perspective, if they've been partying all night and this is all happening at like 6 a.m., I can imagine people being just completely passed out, maybe still drunk, even maybe hungover. There are a number of reasons. It's also dark outside still, so like it's hard to like automatically wake up because the sun hasn't come up yet. there are reasons like that.
This court is in session. Please be seated.
So jurors, I can assure you that by Monday, I mean, we're in really good shape. It's an organizational situation that I have to deal with. So we've been dealing with that. We appreciate your patience and we are in good shape. And Ms. Dianetti, if you need the exhibit, it's here.
Terrific. May I have it published again on the
Yes.
Now, Lieutenant, with regard to the injuries that you observed, did you notice any lividity on the body when you were looking at John O'Keefe?
Being hypothermic, he was very pale overall. So the skin wasn't pinked up yet. So it's hard to really judge the rest of the skin that way until it's warmed up and much later into the scene.
You are familiar with the term
Yep.
lividity, though?
Yes.
And could you just explain that to the jury?
That's like bruising.
Bruising.
So the pooling of blood in lower sections. So for like a cardiac arrest patient, when they have lividity, it looks like bruising on the underside where all the blood has pooled. And we did not really notice that.
But it's not actually bruising from an injury, it's just the blood being
Settling down. It's the same thing, yes.
One at a time, please.
Yep, sorry. So it appears like bruising, and bruising is basically pooling of blood under the skin. So lividity is just gravity-fed pooling of blood under the skin. And it usually happens what is the section of the body that is lowest.
I see. Okay. Now, with regard to the scratches that you've testified about and that you now observe on Exhibit 382, I believe, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your testimony on direct examination was that you observed them in the forearm area, correct?
It was the right, like forearm to arm. I was trying to signal like right up here, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I guess that's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't just on the.
Not just, it was the arm area. You know, mostly what I noticed was forearm, but there was some around there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it wasn't just below the elbow.
It wasn't up just below the elbow.
There was some above the
Yes.
elbow as well?
Yep.
That's consistent with Exhibit 382?
Correct.
On your moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
No further questions.
So Lally, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Lieutenant, thank you very much. So
Yeah,
you're all
thank
set.
Okay.
Our next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would call Mr. Daniel Whitley to the stand.
Another person from the Canton Fire Department.
Watch your step. Clerk, I'm ready to your hand, please.
You solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case down here is for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Daniel Whitley, Whitley.
And what do you do for us, sir?
I'm a paramedic firefighter with the Town of Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire?
I was hired in March of '06.
And prior to that work with the Canton Fire Department, did you work within that same field in any other capacity for any other company?
Yes, correct. I worked for American Medical Response out of Brockton as an EMT intermediate and a paramedic for 5 years.
And you're a certified paramedic, is that correct?
Correct.
And how long have you held that certification?
It was, I believe, November of 2006 that I got that certification.
And is there any sort of continuing educational component or recertification process that's involved with being a certified paramedic?
Yes, we recertify every 2 years. We're required to hold basic life support card, which is just generally CPR, and advanced cardiac life support, which is ACLS. It's more dealing with EKGs and how to run resuscitations, cardiac arrests, things of that nature.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th into January 29th, 2022, were you working with Canton Fire Department on those dates?
Yes,
What kind of shift were you working on that?
24-hour shift, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m.
And where were you assigned on that particular day?
The Ponkbog Station, Station 2.
The Ponkabog Station, where is that located within Canton?
The north side of town on Sassamont Street.
And how were you assigned to a specific duty or a specific?
Yes, I was assigned to Ambulance 2 with Jason Becker. As I was a field training officer at that point, and he was just finishing up his field training after he recently became certified as a paramedic.
And now, at some point shortly after 6 a.m., were you aware of a call or dispatch in regard to Station House 1?
Yes, we had just returned from a previous call about 5 a.m. and heard the tones go off. Actually, we were in the day room, which is where it's the living room of a fire station. And we heard the tones go off. We heard the police going to Fairview Road. And we just kind of sat and were wondering what was going on there.
Now, you yourself, you and firefighter Becker, were you dispatched to a call as well, approximately 6:41 or 6:42 a.m.?
Yes.
And at the time that you received that dispatch, what, if anything, were you aware of with regard to the prior call that the other ambulance was?
So when the tones go off between the two stations, we're able to hear what the dispatch complaint is, what they're going for, and it came in as, I believe, CPR in progress in the snow or something to that regard. So we knew that was a fairly serious call that Station 1 had gone to.
Now, when you received your dispatch at approximately 6:42 a.m. or so, what was that call in regard to, and where did you respond?
We were dispatched for a Section 12.
And as far as your assignments within the ambulance between yourself and firefighter Becker, with regard to this call, who was doing what?
I was driving. He's what we call the tech, the lead paramedic on the case. That's just generally how we operate.
And from your response, or your driving from Station 2 to Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you observe or experience en route in between the two?
At that point, it was snowing pretty heavily. We were coming down Chapman Street, getting ready to take the right onto Fairview. We nearly slid off the road, making the turn onto Fairview. It was snowing that heavily, and I don't believe the roads had been really plowed or treated or anything like that for us to. So it was pretty slippery.
Now, in addition to ambulance number 2 that you and firefighter Becker were in, what, if any, other sort of vehicles or apparatus was dispatched to this call as well?
There was Engine 3, which is the District 1 engine, and at least 2 police cruisers. And then another gray SUV kind of further down from where we parked.
Now, when you arrive in this area on Fairview Road, what, if anything, do you sort of observe as far as who's there when you arrive?
When I got out, my Lieutenant Woodbury and Sam Park were there.
And they were on the engine, is that correct?
They were on the engine, correct.
Now, beyond sort of the personnel from your department, you mentioned that there were some police officers there as well?
Yes, Melanie and Sarah, and then 2 other females, at least 2 other females.
And the other 2 females, where were they when you first sort of get out of the ambulance?
A few yards ahead of us, a few dozen yards ahead of us, I'd say.
And were there any other vehicles beyond sort of first responders that you observed on?
Just that other gray SUV.
And so I guess my question is, where were the 2 females that you observed in relation to the gray SUV?
Near it, maybe in front of, maybe one was inside. There were 3 females there.
And at some point while you're on scene, you learned the identity of your patient, correct?
Yes.
And what was the name of the patient?
Karen Reed.
and you had some conversation with Karen Reed that day, is that correct?
Yes,
And do you see Karen Reed in the courtroom?
I do.
Could you just describe as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's seated right at that table right there.
I'm sorry, if you could just point as to where she is.
Right here.
No, it's just that's record reflect identification.
Okay.
Now, when you first sort of arrive on scene, who, if anyone, is the first person that you talk to?
Lieutenant Woodbury and Sam Park.
And following that conversation, who, if anyone, you speak to?
Probably briefly Lieutenant Mullaney, but more, Officer Mullaney and Officer Saraf.
Now, following your conversation, well, let me ask you this sort of in general terms. When you respond to a call for a Section 12, what is sort of the protocol that you go through in regard to that?
Whether it's a Section 12 or any call, basically, the lead tech generally takes over immediate patient care, goes over, assesses. Usually the partner will go over and try and find out background details, try and find not only, well, especially for a Section 12, you want to get, the tech will get, which is Jason's role, the patient story, and then I'll get everyone else's story.
And at some point, you have a conversation with Ms. Reed as well.
Oh, yes.
And where is that in relation to vehicles on scene? So what is that initial conversation?
The initial conversation, she was very upset. She kept saying, so we had a Section 12 written, and that was to take her to the hospital because she made threats against her life, saying, I don't want to live anymore. If my husband dies, I don't want to be alive anymore. And myself and Jason and Lieutenant Woodbury were kind of like, well, that's seemingly more in the lines of normal grieving process after something traumatic happens to a loved one, whether they're going to die or not. We kind of didn't feel like it kind of led to that level of a Section 12 to have her transported to the hospital. So at that point, I exited the ambulance and I went to speak with Officer Saraf, and I said, this kind of doesn't, if we want her to be at the hospital, get a full eval, we're going to need more than just, if my husband dies, I want to die, because that seems just like normal grieving things to say. And so I went back to the ambulance. He went, I don't know where he went. I don't know whether it was cruiser or what, but he came back, notified me that her
Sustained.
And from that
Hearsay.
conversation, did you receive more information or more clarity as to statements in Ms. Reed and me?
Yes, Officer Saraf had said that.
Objection.
So not what he said, sir. So
We
You
were
are
informed
unmuted.
that,
Objection.
I'm not sure.
Those beeping noises are from the court feed. So he's having an issue right now because he's trying to just tell the story, and he doesn't realize that he can't testify to what anyone else said to him because that's hearsay. That's an out of court statement being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. That's the definition of hearsay. And so he's not used to this, and he definitely comes across as somebody who's a little bit nervous. He's probably not familiar with testifying. Maybe he's not testified before. This is also a very high profile trial. So understandably, he's probably nervous and he's like not quite understanding. Yeah. So yeah, it's yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Let's continue.
So you can't testify to what somebody else told you. You can when there's no objection regarding what Ms. Reed told you,
Okay.
but you can't testify what anybody else told you.
Okay.
So when I say sustain, that means you have to stop.
Okay.
And the lawyer will ask another question.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Firefighter Whitley, at some point, specific to your conversations with the defendant, you described sort of her demeanor, any observations you made in relation to that as you were speaking?
Yes, she was very upset. She kept asking if there was any chance. She kept asking us if we knew if the person ambulance 1 had transported was alive or dead, and we could not speak to that. She asked if somebody could be alive in the snow without a jacket for many hours. And at that point, we were just trying to give her any hope that whomever A1 transported was still alive. And we kind of just talked about far off hypothermia cases where, kids have fallen in rivers and been submerged for many minutes, maybe even hours, and survived with no neurological deficits. So we were just trying to give her some sort of hope on the way to the hospital that there was a chance that her husband could be alive.
Now, at this point, what, if anything, did you know about sort of the relationship between your patient, the defendant, Ms. Reed, and the patient from ambulance 1 that had been transported previously?
She identified him as her husband.
And is that something that she said once or more than once?
Many, many times.
Now, she asked you some questions about his status and made specific reference to his clothes. Is that correct?
The only thing I recall is asking if he could have survived without a jacket.
Now, as far as these conversations that you had with Ms. Reed, where did they occur in relation to the ambulance?
They were in the back of the ambulance.
And who, if anyone, was present in the back of the ambulance beyond yourself and the defendant?
Jason Becker.
And with reference to, you mentioned that firefighter Becker was sort of the lead paramedic or the lead tech on this. Is that correct?
Yes.
So is there, from sort of his role and your role, what are some of the sort of differences in the duties and responsibilities in relation, we'll call it?
So for any Section 12, our department policy is there will be 2 EMTs, paramedics, firefighters with during transport at all times. That's both for our safety and the patient safety. So that's why it wasn't just 2 EMTs or paramedics driving to the hospital. I was in back with Jason, and Sam Park was driving.
Now, as far as you testified earlier about observations of her being upset or distraught, is that correct?
Correct.
Was that consistent throughout your interaction with her, or?
No. There would be episodes where she would go from crying in her hands to all of a sudden perking up. She was crying about having to take care of kids, saying she couldn't do it. And I was saying, you can do this. It's not as hard as it seems. She kept saying, I can't take care of these kids. They're not my kids and they're not his kids. That's when I figured out who ambulance 1 transported. And I was saying, well, it seems like you have a good, strong.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, made you realize, or who did you think it was?
I live in and grew up in the Ponkbog neighborhood of Canton, and Mr. O'Keefe was known for taking on his niece and nephew after, I'm not sure positive of the relationship, but I believe it was his sister and his brother-in-law passed away. And it was something people admired him for, people looked up to him for. But I was able to, I also, I moved into the Ponkbog neighborhood back after living outside of Canton for a few years. The O'Keefes lived diagonally across from me. I never had any sort of interaction with him or anything. When I moved in, my wife was probably about 6 months pregnant, and I had 2 toddlers, so I was pretty busy. I figured he was pretty busy. I never even had a chance to introduce myself or anything before he moved to Meadows, which is how I kind of figured out.
Your Honor, I object to this line of questioning.
Okay, next, sustain. Next question.
Now, you had also mentioned during your conversation with the defendant that she had said some things about Kerry Roberts, correct?
Correct.
And how is it that you know Kerry Roberts?
Well, Kerry lives around the corner from me.
Objection.
No, I'll allow that. Next question, please.
How long have you known Kerry Roberts?
Just from moving back into the neighborhood, she would run the neighborhood block party, and she put out that she would like the fire truck there on the neighborhood Facebook page. So I volunteered to bring the fire truck to the neighborhood block party.
And was Ms. Roberts seen on Fairview when you arrived in your ambulance?
Yes,
So she was one of the other females along with the defendant.
correct.
Now, with reference to when you brought up as far as support system and included Ms. Roberts within that, what, if anything, did the defendant say about Ms. Roberts?
Objection.
Sustain. Next question, please.
Asking for hearsay.
Now, this conversation that you had with the defendant in the ambulance, about how long a period of time are we talking?
20, 25 minutes.
And beyond what you've already testified to, what did sort of that conversation consist of, or what was the sort of tone and tenor of that conversation?
Again, we were just trying to give her any support. She was, once we were getting closer to the hospital, we
Objection.
So the tone and tenor. So what can you tell us about that? That's admissible, Mr. Yannetti. Go ahead.
the tone, she would go from being almost despondent to when she asked me if I knew Kerry Roberts, the only tone I can use to describe it is snarky.
Objection. Move to strike.
I'll strike that.
Now, you transported to a Good Samaritan, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you, during the transport, where are you in relation to Ms. Reed from Fairview to Good Samaritan?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
During the transport, Ms. Reed is where within the engine?
I believe we have what we call a tech bench, which is a long bench. There's the ambulance stretcher, and then to next to the ambulance stretcher is, we call it the CPR seat, and then that's where Miss Reed sat. And then I was in what we call the airway seat, which is basically like a captain's chair behind the stretcher.
Really quick, I just want to answer this. Draco, Amy, what's wrong with snarky? Too much hearsay. So the issue wasn't that he was talking about her being snarky, but he included with that her asking about, whether I knew so-and-so, asking whether I knew Kerry Roberts. And she was snarky about that. If he had just said, excuse me, if he had just said she came across as snarky when she was talking, that would have been fine. But because he included that statement of what it was that she said when she was being snarky, that is impermissible hearsay.
And in addition to yourself and the defendant, who, if anyone else was sort of in the back of the ambulance at that time?
During transport?
Yes.
During transport, it was just me, Jason Becker, and Miss Reed.
So yourself along with firefighter Becker and right?
Correct.
Who was driving you?
Sam Park.
Now, when you arrived at Good Samaritan, what, if anything, happened?
Miss Reed was asking to be able to see John, and I made the decision that I would run ahead to see if that was in the realm of possibility with the emergency room physician there. So I ran ahead. I came into they call it the code room at Good Sam, and I asked if the wife could see the husband. The ER doctor asked if she would be upset. I said if she would be upset if she was allowed to or not. And I said she's going to be upset. I believe she's going to be upset either way. He was asking if she would get in the way of the resuscitation efforts, and I said it's possible. She's very upset.
And so once you arrive at the hospital with the patient, where do you go along with Ms. Reed?
We escorted her down to we call it the psych hall or the behavioral hall at Good Sam.
And about how long was it after you escorted her into the hospital that you stayed with her following that?
At least 10 minutes.
And during those 10 minutes, how would you describe sort of her behavior or demeanor during that time?
Objection.
No, he can testify to that.
It's fine.
He was giving the nurses a hard time about, I'm sorry, she was giving the nurses a hard time about having to get into a Johnny, about having to submit a urine sample. Even the AR text went to the physician who was in the code room to see if she could not have to wear a Johnny, and the ER doc said no, if she's in the psych hall, she's a psych patient, needs to be in a Johnny. So at that point, there was just a nurse and a tech. We don't usually leave a psych patient with just a single nurse and a tech. So we decided to wait until security had gotten there before we left.
May I have one moment?
Yes.
John O'Rourke, thanks for the super chat. Being a lawyer, is it concerning for the jurors to see zero emotion from KR? She had an emotional relationship with John, still nothing from her. Generally speaking, the advice for clients on either side, whether it's criminal or civil, is to not show too much emotion.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Yannetti.
Thank you. Good afternoon,
Cross-examination.
sir.
Good afternoon.
Let me just finish this thought real quick. So generally speaking, the advice is to not show emotion, also because judges will often reprimand the clients or attorneys for making faces, because they'll say that could be manipulating the jury, or you're trying to manipulate the jury. So some judges are absolute sticklers about it too. I have known of some that are very, very strict.
So, Mr. Whitley, when you showed up, you learned that Karen Reed was the patient that you were to deal with, correct?
Correct.
And it was your expectation that she would be going to the hospital, correct?
Correct.
One of the things that you do when you transport somebody to the hospital is you try to get a medical history, correct?
Yep.
Why is that important?
Generally, we get pertinent medical history to pass on to the hospital. So if something were to happen where the patient wasn't able to describe their past medical history, it gets passed on to the next caregiver, which would be the nurses, doctors at the hospital.
Okay. More information is always better than less information, correct?
I would say so.
And with regard to Ms. Reed, did you take a medical history from her?
I assume Jason did.
Okay. Did you learn the results of that medical history?
You'd have to refer to Jason's report.
I may have a moment now.
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Whitley, if I I'm actually going to show you two documents with your permission. One would be Jason's report.
Okay.
And you were talking about Jason Becker, correct?
Correct.
The other is a police report from Sergeant Yuri Buchnick. I'm going to give you the second page of that.
So let's do them one at a time.
Sure. And you've asked for Jason Becker's report, so I'll give you that first, okay?
Okay.
And when I approach you, I'm going to hand this to you, and I just ask you to look at it silently by yourself.
Okay.
And then look up at me when you're done.
Okay.
This is exactly what needs to be done to refresh a recollection. Like this, all of this could be shown in trial advocacy classes, evidence classes. These defense attorneys are exactly on it for all of these things.
I'm going to collect that from you if you don't mind.
The first report was the first report from my lieutenant.
Was Jason Becker's report included in
Yes.
it as well?
Yep.
Having reviewed those documents, does that refresh your memory as to the medical history that was taken?
Yes.
And what can you tell us about that?
Just lists multiple sclerosis.
What is multiple sclerosis?
I believe it's a neurodegenerative disease where the myelin sheathing of the trying to think of the word here, but
Slowly lose motor functioning.
you know, I understand.
I'm sure you do. It's a disease.
It's a disease that's progressive and has neurological muscle control things involved with it.
And when you say progressive, that means it gets worse over time as you age?
As I understand it.
And that was the medical history you got from Karen Lee?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
That's
All right.
interesting.
So, sir, you are all set. Thank you, Mr. Whitley.
Okay.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Ron, call Mr. Jason Becker to the stand.
Oh, that's whose report we just heard from. Okay. John O'Rourke, what's better for KR? Looking pissed or sympathetic. She has a bad court presence, IMO, so far anyway. That may change. I don't know. I mean, her facial reactions could come back to bite her if she's looking like she's got like a really strong RBF. Arresting bum face to be good with the YouTube algos. It could be making an impression on the jury, which is negative. That's absolutely possible.
Watch your step. You get there, please. Face that clerk and raise your right hand.
Just tell us whether you understand the court and jury in the case down here, and should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
First name is Jason. Last name is Becker. Becker.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a firefighter paramedic at the Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire Department?
5.5 years.
And prior to that, what, if any, other employment did you have sort of within that same field?
I worked at Found Ambulance and South Shore Hospital.
How long did you work at each of those respective positions?
Found Ambulance was about 5 years. South Shore Hospital, approximately 3 years.
And with regard to South Shore Hospital, what is it that you did there?
I was a nursing assistant in the emergency room.
And with regard to your work as a firefighter paramedic for the Canton Fire Department, you a certified paramedic?
Yes.
And when did you first receive that certification?
October 2021.
And is that something that you receive, or when you receive that, is something that goes on in perpetuity, or is that something that you have a continuing educational component or recertification?
It's Cont'd education, every 2 years, you have to recertify.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022. Were you working on that occasion?
I was.
And where were you assigned? I'm sorry. What type of shift were you working on that occasion?
What type of shift?
Yes, like what hour to what hour?
8 a.m. to 8 a.m., 24 hours.
So 8 a.m. on the 28th until 8 a.m. on the 29th.
Correct.
And where were you assigned on that day?
I was at Canton Station 2, Ambulance 2.
And who, if anyone else, was assigned with you to Ambulance 2 at Station 2 on that day?
Daniel Whitley, firefighter Daniel Whitley.
Now, at some point when you were working on the 29th, shortly after 6 a.m. or so, did you become aware of a call for station house number 1?
Yes.
And what, if anything, were you aware of as far as that earlier call?
As far as we know, there was a man down the road, initial, and I believe it was upgraded eventually to CPR in progress.
Now, at some point following that,
So you know that spottiness is coming from the feed itself.
approximately 6:41 a.m. or so, did you, your station, dispatch to Fairview Road?
Yes.
And in regard to
A psych eval, possible section 12.
And in addition to yourself and firefighter Whitley in Ambulance 2, what, if any, other sort of vehicles were dispatched by your department to that call as well?
Canton Engine 3.
And if you know, who, if anyone, was on Canton Engine 3 at that time?
Lieutenant Greg Woodbury, firefighter Sam Park.
Now, with regard to the ambulance that you were in with firefighter Whitley, what were sort of, let me ask you this, between sort of call volume, what, if any, sort of policy or protocol is there as far as who does what on a particular call?
We switch off.
And so on this particular call that you were dispatched to Fairview Road, what were sort of each of your respective duties and responsibilities between yourself and firefighter Whitley?
Firefighter Whitley was the driver at that point, and it was my tech, is what it's called. So the next patient would be mine.
And so as sort of you were the lead tech on this, is that correct?
Correct.
And so as far as the lead tech's role, what, if any, duties or responsibilities do you have in regard to writing a report?
It's my report. That'd be right.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Yeah, this witness,
Documents that should review that with us.
this witness does seem very nervous.
The first report up here is the engines. Second one would be mine.
You recognize the first few pages of that as the engines report and the last few are yours, correct?
Correct.
And that's your report with relation to this dispatch and this call, correct?
Correct.
Can I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I want the seat to introduce in a minute as the next.
So both reports through this witness? Is there any objection?
May I just take a look at the DA's copy? May we approach?
Okay.
All right, another sidebar. Let's see if we'll get up to live. Yes, we are. And now they're coming back.
Bless you.
With that addendum, I would seek to introduce and admit that as the next exhibit.
Okay.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, can I return the report to the witness?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, when you first sort of arrive in the area of 34, when you arrive in the area of Fairview Road, what, if anything, is it that you first observe upon your arrival?
Coming down the street or on scene?
Yes, coming down the street.
Coming down the street, live police lights. You can see the fire engine, and I believe I said it's one black SUV.
And where is it that you and the ambulance sort of park in reference to those other vehicles that you see?
I believe we parked. If the SUV was facing towards us, we parked to the left. I don't recall where the police cruiser was, though.
And when you first arrive there, who, if anyone, is it that you first speak with when you get there?
When we got out of the ambulance, I passed Officer Saraf and Officer Mulaney. They kind of briefed us, and then I walked over to the black SUV.
And when you walk over to the black SUV, who is it that you observe in that black SUV?
I saw 2 females.
And of those 2 females, do you see one of them in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
Right over there, the jacket on.
That's the record reflect identification of the defendant.
Okay.
Now, with respect to the defendant, Ms. Reed, where within the vehicle is she when you first come up to the vehicle on the foot?
When I remember, she was in the front passenger seat.
And what, if any, knowledge did you have as far as the defendant, Ms. Reed, and her relationship to the earlier call that ambulance wanted to dispatch?
Very little. I think we had gotten briefed that she was the wife of the previous patient.
And was that something that she had stated or something that somebody else had stated? Where does that awareness come
I
from?
believe it was one of the Canton police officers that said it.
I'm sorry, what was that answer?
It was one of the Canton police officers.
Okay.
And so when you walk up to the car, what is it that you say to her, or what, if any, conversation did you have with Ms. Reed at that?
So I went up to the window and introduced myself and just kind of asked what was going on.
And how did she respond to that?
She was kind of, she was distraught. She was crying. She kind of told us that the statements she may have made, she didn't mean it because of the current events that she had just gone through.
What, if anything, did she say about that? If anything, did she say about what she had gone through?
She had just done CPR on her husband.
And so she referred to him as her husband as well.
Yes.
And this conversation that you had sort of at the side of the SUV, is that through the door, through the window?
From what I recall, it was through the window.
And at some point, does the conversation move to the end?
Correct.
About how long was the conversation at the vehicle before the conversation shifted to the end?
5 to 10 minutes.
And as far as your dispatch for psych or section 12, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury sort of that process, just in general terms first, as far as what does that process entail?
And when we get on scene?
Yes.
For a section?
Yes, please.
We go on scene, we kind of look at the environment, see what the environment's like, see if the patient's cooperative, uncooperative, what their demeanor is, if there's any obvious self-harm. If there's none, we kind of go up and talk to them, get a report, and ask them some basic triage questions.
And is that sort of the policy or the protocol or what you followed in this instance with Ms. Reed?
Correct.
Now, beyond what she had indicated to you initially, what, if anything, was she asking you during the course of your conversation with her once you were in the ambulance?
She kept asking if he was dead or could he be dead.
Is that something that she said once or more than once or something?
More than once.
And could you describe sort of the tone of her voice when she was saying?
It was kind of like a was a rapid kind of pressured speech. She was just a lot repetitive.
And as you were speaking with her, what, if any, observations did you make of her facial area?
She had blood on her face and her neck and her blood around her mouth, her neck and chin.
So with regard to sort of any earlier suicidal statements, what, if anything, did she say in relation to that?
She said she made him because she just went through traumatic events, seeing her husband dead, and she had no plan on acting on it.
Now, pursuant to a Section 12 call, what, if anything, are you doing as far as documentation goes with respect to vital signs, things like that?
It depends on the situation. In a situation of misreads, I took a regular just vital signs, pulse oximetry to see her heart rate. But for someone like a female psych patient, it's more verbal.
And as far as any of those sort of vital signs and things that you took, what, if anything, abnormal did you note in regard to that?
Nothing too abnormal. Just the heart rate might have been a little bit high, but within normal range.
Could you please keep your voice up, sir? Thank you.
Sorry. With the vital signs, her heart rate was a little high. It was 98, but it was nothing concerning.
During the time that you're having this conversation with her in the back of the ambulance, how would you describe it?
She would have periods of calmness, and then other periods she would appear agitated because she didn't want to go to the hospital. But all in all, she was cooperative with us.
Now, at some point, she's cooperative, correct, and agrees to go?
Eventually, yes.
When you say eventually, was there some conversation related?
We kind of mentioned to her basically what a Section 12 is. And unfortunately, she'd have to come with us voluntarily or involuntarily.
So you're explaining the process to her, is that correct?
Correct.
Eventually, she agrees to go, correct?
Correct.
And as far as the transport goes, who, if anyone, is in the back of the ambulance with her during the transport period?
Me and firefighter Whitley.
And who, if anyone, was driving the ambulance to the hospital?
Firefighter Park.
And which hospital did you transport Ms. Reeds?
We went to the Good Samaritan Hospital.
Now, during the course of transfer to the hospital, what, if anything else, did Ms. Reed say with reference to children?
She was talking about Keith's children, and she was unsure, and she didn't know if she'd be able to take care of them. She was worried about that.
She was worried about that.
Yeah, she's worried about who would take care of the children if he was pronounced dead.
And what, if anything, did she say about herself in reference to the children?
She didn't think that she could take care of them on her own.
Now, as far as this other person or the patient from the earlier call, how did she to that person in relationship to yourself?
She was calling him the husband.
Now, with reference to this particular, with reference to Ms. Reed in this conversation, what, if anything, did she say in regards to the last time that she had spoken to who she called her husband?
She had said that they had gotten into an argument. She was sad because that was the last thing she had said to him was the argument, but she didn't go into detail on what the argument was about or what was said.
Now, with regard to her speaking about the children, what, if any, further conversation did either yourself or firefighter Whitley have with her in regard to that?
With children?
Yes.
I don't recall.
The other female party that Miss Reed was initially with in the vehicle when you first arrived, did you know who that was?
I don't know who she was.
And at any point in time, subsequent to that, did you learn who she was?
I did.
And who did you learn her to be?
She was Miss Carrie Roberts.
And with relation to your conversation with Miss Reed on that day of January 29th, what, if anything, did she say about Miss Roberts?
Objection.
Sustained.
The regard to the sort of medical questions that you were asked, from those medical questions, what, if any, questions would you typically ask someone with relation to consumption of alcohol or drugs?
Well, probably part of the psych assessment, I asked if she had taken any drugs or alcohol, and she had denied it at that point.
She said that she had not, correct?
Correct.
The observations that you testified to earlier in regard to her, and by her I mean Miss Reed's demeanor, did that change at all during the course of your interaction with her, or was that consistent throughout?
Demeanor, as in,
It's a poorly phrased question. I'm going to try and rephrase it. So, with regard to her demeanor throughout the course of your interaction with her, how would you describe that?
she was cooperative. Then she'd be calm, and then eventually she would kind of get a little agitated and repetitive questions. But she seemed distraught.
Now, with respect to the person she indicated was her husband, what, if any, questions did she ask either you or firefighter Whitley or both in relation to him?
She was asking if he was dead, or could he be dead? Could be dead, and she said, "Could I have hit him?"
Was that something that she asked once or more than once?
It wasn't a lot. It was more of could he be dead? Could he be dead?
So somewhat repetitive, is that correct?
Correct.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Firefighter Becker, just my own clarification. You testified earlier that first arriving on scene and first spoke with Ms. Reed, she indicated that there was some statements that she said there were some statements that she did not mean, correct?
Correct. Suicidal statements.
And so, exactly. So my question is, that was in reference to the suicidal statements she had made prior to your arrival, correct?
Correct.
Not to any subsequent statements, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Rona. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You and I have never met, right?
I believe so.
He loves asking that at the very
I wanted
beginning.
to go back to one piece of testimony that you offered on direct examination, if I may.
Sure.
You had, in response to a question from the prosecutor about the medical history and your question to Ms. Reed about whether she had had any alcohol to drink. I believe your answer today was she denied having drank alcohol the night before?
At the time that she was, I mean, she could have. I don't know if she drank alcohol the night before, but at that time, I asked if she had any drugs or alcohol, and she said no.
I'm sorry, if I just didn't hear.
Yeah,
the
you
answer.
need to keep your voice up, sir, or speak
Okay.
directly into
Sorry.
the microphone.
So I asked her if she had any drugs or alcohol, and she said no.
Oh, if she had any drugs.
Well,
or
if she
alcohol.
taken any drugs or alcohol, she said no.
Did you specify a time period?
I just assumed it'd be in the last few hours for the reason why we were there.
I assumed.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Unsure if she had alcohol days prior, but for the reason why we were there.
Okay. So was it your understanding that the two of you had an understanding of what you were asking?
Sure.
Objection, move to
Yeah,
strike.
yeah. So the objection sustained. It's stricken. Ask the question differently, Ms. Giannetti.
It's argumentative.
All right. So I guess with regard to your intent and your state of mind when you were asking that question, you were asking, had you taken any drugs or alcohol within the last few hours? That's what you meant to ask?
Objection.
So the objection sustained.
What did you specifically ask?
So when I ask a patient if any drugs or alcohol, I'm talking about at that point in time, but an hour before, 2 hours before, not days before, weeks before.
Okay.
So-
And this was at 6:40 in the morning?
Correct.
Did you smell any alcohol on her at that time?
I did not.
Okay. You would agree that,
This is important for the DUI charge right here, obviously. If there's any signs that she may have been drunk, did she smell funny? Did she, like this kind of stuff. This is all going directly to that. This is kind of new stuff that we're talking about here.
she did tell you at some point that she had alcohol the night before, correct?
No.
All right. So this is now, what's today, May 3rd of 2024?
Correct.
And this happened back in January, on January 29th of 2022.
Correct.
You were interviewed by a Trooper Michael Proctor on February 14th of 2022. Do you recall that?
I recall meeting with him, yes.
And February 14th of 2022 would have been a little bit more than 2 weeks after January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Your memory of what Karen Reed told you about whether she had anything to drink the night before would have been much better on February 14th of 2022 when you were talking to Trooper Michael Proctor than it would be today, correct?
Correct.
Because your memory
Impeachment
doesn't get
incoming.
better over time, correct?
Certain circumstances, sure.
And with regard to whether Karen had indicated that she took any drugs, you told Trooper Proctor she said that she had not, correct?
Correct.
With regard to whether she had had alcohol the night before, Trooper Proctor on February 14th of 2022 that she did consume alcohol last night, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to see a sidebar on this. Please bring that with you, please.
Interesting. Okay. 1 second. I'm taking some notes here. So, okay, sidebar on the issue of alcohol. Could this be a hearsay issue? Perhaps, maybe. Let me get some questions here while we wait. Diana, since we're all caught up. Diana Bosch. Oh, no, we're not caught up. Oh,
With
okay.
your
Let
permission-
me go back.
With your permission, I'll repeat the question.
Sure.
You told Trooper Proctor on February 14th of 2022 that Karen had told you that she did consume alcohol the previous night, correct?
If that's in his notes,
Well, is your memory exhausted as to whether you told him that?
I don't recall.
If you saw his report with your statements in it, would that refresh your memory?
Sure.
Okay.
It's a two-page report. I'll give you both, actually. It's a two-page report. I'll give you both pages, but I have highlighted a line on the second page, so I would direct you to that. May I approach?
Yes. And take your time reading it, sir.
Yes, yeah, and please read it silently to yourself and look up at me when you're done.
All right. So while he's reading that, Diana Bushane, can witness refuse to testify? I mean, they can, but there are repercussions for it if they have been subpoenaed, because that is considered an act in contempt of court. So there could be, witness could be jailed, the witness could be, there's all kinds of things that can happen. I mean, the answer is technically a person can. There's just consequences. JC the Music Man. Do we know how much time is left in the trial? It would be nice to see a brief rundown of what we've learned so far. So we are on day 4, and this is the first week of trial. It's supposed to run 6 to 8 weeks. So we are in still the baby stages of this trial. We are.
So I did say.
So, Mr. Becker, a couple of things. Wait for a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But also,
Sorry.
you have to keep your voice up.
Okay.
I'm close to you and I'm having trouble hearing you. Most
Okay.
of the jurors are further away.
Can you
And
give the
the
same
witness
instruction to the
wants
prosecutor,
collect that
please?
from you and then ask you a question, okay?
So,
If I may approach you on.
Yes.
Oh crap! I just missed it.
Having reviewed that document, does that refresh your memory as to whether or not Karen Reed, or strike that? Having reviewed that report, does that refresh your memory as to the fact that
Does that refresh your memory?
Does that refresh your memory?
it does.
Okay, and so did you tell Trooper Proctor on February 14th that Karen Reed had told you on January 29th that she had consumed alcohol the night before that?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that when you were listening to her talk at times, that her speech was very rapid?
Correct.
And particularly when she had said the words, is he dead? Is he dead? She would repeat it repetitively, correct?
Correct.
And she was fixated on that, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to the,
Just so you know, JC the Music Man, if you're still in the chat, I'm so sorry. I unsaved your question just now. So if you would like to re-ask it, please do. I tried to get it. I can't find it. It's a ways back. So if you're still here, please do re-ask. Thank you.
last interaction that she spoke about with whom you thought she said her husband, she didn't give you any detail about that, correct?
She did not.
You don't know whether it was an in-person communication?
That wasn't my position to ask more details about that.
Oh, and I'm not criticizing you, sir. I'm just trying to get to what your knowledge was in terms of
Right.
information you got from her. So she didn't specify that it was an in-person communication, correct?
No,
She didn't specify as to whether it was a phone conversation?
she did not.
She didn't specify whether it was a text message exchange back and forth?
She did not.
And she didn't specify whether it was an angry voicemail that she left, correct?
She did not.
No further questions. Thank you.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Becker or Firefighter Becker, you are all set, sir. Thank you very much.
Next witness.
That's okay. Thank you. Yes, you can leave that right where it is. Thank you, sir. Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
May we approach?
Sure.
Okay. They are going to approach. Alrighty. Okay, next question here. Pulling it up. I'm so sorry. about that last question that I unsaved. I'm really trying to get all of these. Genergy, why wouldn't the photos of the injuries be allowed? It may be for, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why those weren't allowed in this case, to be honest with you. Also, Mountain Princess 207, thanks so much for putting this up. I should have put this up when we had the photos of the injuries. Trigger warning, of course, because if those injuries are shown, I know that's really rough for a lot of people to watch. So if you're ever having a hard time throughout this trial, we're talking about murder, we're talking about death, take care of your mental health, please do. Danny Sigiclo, can you show us the photos you were saying of the visit in the car? I think at the end, I think so. I can scroll through some of those and kind of show some of those from Twitter or X, whatever it's called. So I'll save.
Does it make sense that rather than starting with another witness, figure it's a Friday afternoon, it's been a long week for you all, we'll excuse you at this point.
Oh.
So please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any
Where's our
independent
excuse?
research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, disregard it and let us know. And have a great weekend. Monday will be a full day. We'll see you first thing Monday morning.
Rise to the jury. Rise this way.
Okay. So then, yes, we can show those photos basically now. So I'm sure that the court feed is going to end in a minute. I'll keep it just in case there's anything important happening, because I did miss that argument earlier.
All right. Because I've decided that it makes more sense to do exhibits the old fashioned way, because it's simply not working out.
Okay. So that is it. And you know what? Folks have been asking for it, and I have not played it on these trial streams yet. I don't think so, unless maybe once I have. I'm gonna throw it out there just for the fun of it.
Don't be suspicious. 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 Don't be suspicious.
John Ralphio?
So yes. Absolutely love that. There have been some things that have been a little bit suspicious. So, but it is also a murder trial. So I also don't want to be making a total mockery of it. But I've also been playing some other memes and clips and things like that. So, absolutely, love that clip, as you guys know by now. Okay, folks, I'll get these questions. I've got a bunch of questions to go through still, so I want to finish those out, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. But for this, absolutely, I can show you guys. Okay, so this is David Bienick, a journalist who's been in court, I think, every day. But these are some photos of the SUV, the Lexus 570 that jurors viewed today outside 34 Fairview Road. And so this is kind of like out of order. So there's the front of it. There's that tail light. It looks like no, that's not a scratch. There's a tail light. There's a bump right there that they can see a bump and some scratches. So I don't know about any other scratches on there, if those would have been from that night. But that missing tail light is what they are definitely looking at. Inside of the car, I'm not sure why that particularly matters. And that's the other side of it. And so this is the front of the house, 34 Fairview Road. Okay, so that is those photos. Okay, so here's some video. Here's the Lexus 570 that jurors viewed. It has a busted taillight, a small dent on the trunk. It hasn't been registered since 2022. So yeah, I mean, we did see the photos also of it, and I'm going in reverse order here. Okay, jurors will also, okay, so yeah, that's the Lexus. This is photographers, bystanders, and Karen Reed supporters watch the jury view from the end of the street. So this is, they're on the opposite side. The jurors are on the opposite side of the road. So these are not the jurors here that are in this view here. So, and apparently the whole highway, I guess, was shut down from Dedham to Westwood for the jury to go visit the crime scene in Canton. So that's what I expected them to do, is that the police would probably be shutting down traffic so that they could make their way over there. They're about 300 feet away, so we cannot hear anything being said. We see jurors, judge, attorneys, and court staff attending or standing in the middle of the street. So if you guys want to see more of this in detail, go to David Bienick's Twitter account. So Bienick WCVB is the handle. That's where to go. I guess, somebody mentioned that the airbag in the car. That's okay. That's interesting. That is an interesting point. So now I can see why that would be. I don't see anything about an airbag though. Like, that to me looks intact. Yeah, that looks intact to me. I don't see anything about that airbag being out of place. Okay. All right, so that is that. Let's get some other questions, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll get working on a recap. Genergy question: why are the photos of the injuries not allowed? Yeah, we talked about this already a little bit, but basically for that one, I'm not sure exactly why. They may have. My guess actually is that they probably had some kind of a motion in limine ahead of trial about some of these images. Maybe this was not a time when, I don't know, a time when they would have approved for them to be viewed. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know without having reviewed the motions in limine for this case. Furious. Did we get any info on that sidebar? I'm sorry. I should have answered this question at the time, because I don't have the context now more than an hour later as to which sidebar that was. I'm so sorry. John O'Rourke. Did someone say scratches? I vote Indy scratches. I'm so sorry. I gave her some while she was here. Thank you so much for the super chat. Ellie, question: were they fighting? Was someone cheating? Well, she did. Well, so okay, according to the testimony just now, she did tell the firefighter, paramedic, that they had gotten into an argument before she dropped him off. That was like the last conversation that they had, was an argument. So that's what he says that she said. I don't know if that is disputed. That sounds like that was testimony that didn't end up really getting tested on cross-examination. There also has been testimony about an allegation that she had caught him kissing another woman earlier that month, like over New Year's. And so that is potentially an issue here too. There's a possibility that he had been caught cheating on her. I don't know what the defense is going to say about that, if they're going to have Karen go on the stand, if she's going to say otherwise, but that is what the sister-in-law testified to, that she had been texting with Karen Reed about that. Sheena Ford, question: were the homeowners interviewed by the police? No one interviewed the homeowners. No one went into the home to take a look at the home by the police. Laquaria, I'm curious if the homeowners will be witnesses. How could they possibly have missed all the lights, noise, and commotion on their front yard at such a quiet early hour? They are going to be called. They're going to be called. If they're not called by the prosecution, they'll be called by the defense for sure. So and the only, I should have, okay, this is the one like caveat that I should have added to earlier. Can a witness be forced to testify? The one exception to that is if they invoke their rights under the Fifth Amendment. So, I mean, but if the homeowners, if these other individuals who were there are called by the defense to testify, and they get up and they invoke the Fifth Amendment, I feel like, that invoking the Fifth Amendment should not draw any sort of an inference of guilt, right? It should not draw any sort of an inference as to whether or not that person actually did anything. Every criminal defendant is assured the same right to not testify if that is the more advantageous route for them. The same thing is true for other witnesses as well. If they think that there is a potential for criminal liability on their own, in testifying, then they also have the ability to invoke the Fifth Amendment. Now, in a case like this, realistically, I think that because there has been so much that has been dug up about this whole conspiracy theory, I think that the jury probably would not look too kindly on that. Realistically, should they? No, they aren't supposed to make any sort of inferences about that. But the reality is people are people. So that, can happen. Absolutely. Jerry Roth, Legalbytes, there is a woman in front of the witness stand that looks like either a CPAP machine or a microphone. Wasn't sure if you knew what that was. Yes, that is a recording device. She is the court reporter. So she's taking the transcript of everything being said in the courtroom by talking into it. Aussie Insider, judging her clothes and looks is not evidence, IMO. So this is not so much a question, but more of a point that is, I definitely agree. However, I often talk about courtroom behavior, courtroom dress. That's one of my favorite topics, actually, is to talk about courtroom dress, like what people wear in the courtroom, especially because during trial, you're sitting there for so many hours and so many days, especially a long trial like this. And the parties cannot communicate with the jury. The jury can't ask questions directly of them. I mean, in some cases, in some trials, the jury is allowed to ask questions, to the court, essentially, to try to draw out evidence and whatnot. But that's relatively rare, in my opinion, and I don't think that's happening here. But basically, like they're the only ways to like communicate certain things are very subtle communications. And someone's dress can communicate certain things. I talked a lot about it during Depp v. Heard, especially because Amber Heard gave so much to talk about with the things that she was wearing. And the thing is, it's not talking about like judging, someone for what they wear. Generally speaking, the question is this appropriate for court? And is this the type of look that communicates what you want the jury to communicate about who you are and what you represent and your arguments in court. So as an example, in Depp v. Heard, the big issue with the things that Amber Heard was wearing most of the time was the outfits were very strong, very severe. Some of them were like a military kind of button jacket. There's also one that it was like kind of a higher collar, almost it was like a Dr. Evil kind of jacket. These were things that looked very like, a lot of them looked like high fashion trendy, which first of all is kind of puts her more in the Hollywood box. Like I am looking very Hollywood, as opposed to I'm trying to relate to you by wearing a bit more normal clothes. And then there's the aspect of like, she's trying to represent herself as this female who has been victimized by another person. And yet the look that she's giving and the appearance that she gives every day in court is of a very tough, strong woman. So those two messages kind of counteract with one another, and that's harmful to her case. So, but here, so far in this particular case, the things that Karen Reed is wearing, I think they're entirely courtroom appropriate. Like there's nothing, I've seen some comments about like some of the stuff that she's wearing is like expensive jackets, things like that. She works in finance. She's a professor. I don't really care about that. Like to me, that doesn't matter. And the things that she's wearing too, they're not like very loud. Like it doesn't have like the brands written all over them. Like it's like, she's got like Louis Vuitton everything, where it's like the brand is just, the logo is just right out there in your face. And there's nothing that she's wearing that's like that. So that to me is she's not like flaunting wealth. That's where she might be running into some issues, especially depending on the demographics of the jury. But here she's not wearing anything that to me really screams like this is somebody who is being antagonistic towards people of other socioeconomic classes. And in fact, the way that she's dressed is completely appropriate for court. Totally appropriate for court. It conveys a respect for the process, a respect for the court, a respect for the judge, a respect for the jury. And so I have zero problems whatsoever with what Karen Reed is wearing in court here. So I understand what you're saying, that it feels wrong to be judging these people, based on the look that they are presenting and based on, the things that they're wearing. However, humans are humans, and we still detect certain communications, from people subconsciously, right? I mean, there are lawyers on YouTube, for example, who always wear a suit. Always wear a suit because it communicates to the public, to the viewer, I am a lawyer. This is why you take me seriously. I have always opted for a much more casual look because I would much rather have this space be sort of toned down and friendly and casual so that it's much more approachable. That's just been the decision that I've generally made. So, but it's you'll find that in all kinds of different places. So those are my thoughts on all of that. It's not to judge anyone for, generally speaking, for wearing certain things or doing certain things. It's just putting those things in a very particular environment where things are getting communicated. Jerry Roth, does the judge seem irritated anytime defense asks to approach, or is that just me? Judge does seem a bit of irritated with the defense, generally speaking. Anytime you hear those loud sighs, that's the judge, and it always comes about during the defense when the defense is doing their cross examinations every single time. I don't know that she's conscious of it. She's probably not conscious of it, but it is noticeable. It is noticeable, and I'm not the kind of person that wants to like immediately jump to anything like that. I don't. I'm very slow to come to those kinds of conclusions, generally speaking, because I don't want to jump to conclusions. But here, I do notice it. Doctor Who 8675309, has the prosecution presented any evidence Karen did it? So, I mean, there are multiple ways of looking at that question. They have presented evidence that she did it, right? There's evidence, there's testimonial evidence of her making these admissions. Now, whether or not that evidence is credible is up to the jury, and that is going to be weighed against the cross examinations where these various inconsistencies have come in. Of course, for me personally, I have not seen anything that convinces me personally that yes, she did it. I think that there are questions on both sides still, but the issue at the end of the day is that it's up to the prosecution. They're the ones that have the burden to prove beyond reasonable doubt. If they don't meet their burden, she's by default not guilty, not necessarily innocent, but not guilty under the law. John Smith, Legalbytes, with the conspiracy defense being a mistake, I think I meant more. It's almost like the jury could think, well, they didn't prove a conspiracy, so she must have done it. That is okay. So that's a possibility, that sometimes you go too far with what you're asking the jury to the road that you're asking the jury to come down with you. But I don't know. In this case, I think it's entirely possible for someone to meet the defense halfway. To not completely discard everything that the defense is saying because of the fact that they are arguing a much stronger argument, especially because of the fact that they have put on from the very beginning of this trial some very strong evidence suggesting at the very least that the investigation was faulty and done in an incompetent way. So because of that, like, they've put on a very strong case for that already from the get-go, that I think that it gives them some space to sort of run with the other theory a little bit further. So, alrighty. Let me see if there are some more questions here since I've been chitty-chatting. I apologize if I've missed any too, by the way. I really try to get all of these, but I don't always catch them all. Let's see. Did I let's see. There was a question here somewhere. thought I saw one here. Carolyn V, could it be that the judge is just closer to the mic because it's worth sitting up and paying attention when defense speaks? That is entirely a possibility. However, you can always mute your mic when you're not talking. So maybe that's just like too much effort for her to remember in the moment that she just wants to be able to like respond to an objection. I mean, but the problem is it is for many people creating a certain impression. Maybe not everyone, but for many people it is. So Heather S., has there been a shift of the defense trying to catch inconsistencies in current and previous testimony, but now they're giving reports to refresh memories? Were they told to change this? No, this is their strategy has been decided for the most part a long time ago, I think. I don't think that they are I don't think that they've shifted their strategy because anyone has told them anything. Generally speaking, the attorneys run the trial strategy. And they would have decided these things a long time ago. But also, I mean, the refreshing recollections also still sort of fits what they've been doing anyway, which is attacking memory. So catching inconsistencies, and that's part of what they're doing with refreshing recollections here, is they're still going back to these prior statements that these people have made and pointing out where those statements have kind of changed over time or evolved or gotten more detailed or less detailed in various ways. Carolyn, would you agree that it looks like the police at least tried to shield the Albert family from being suspects? I think that's definitely a possibility. I think for me personally, I'm not quite willing to go fully to that conclusion to say that the police were actively covering them up. But I'm seeing what the defense is putting. I'm picking up what the defense is putting down, so to speak. I think that the defense has been putting on a good argument for it, and they've been putting up evidence to support that argument. I don't know that I'm fully ready to commit, but there is a bit there. Let's see. And I think one more question, and then we'll probably call it for the day. Baz 80s, they keep impeaching the witnesses. Do you think the prosecution is still confident, or are they just too late to course correct? I think, I don't know. Because I don't know what other evidence they have up their sleeve at this point. We've still got to hear from the medical examiner. We've still got to hear from the hospital staff. We've still got to hear from expert witnesses talking about accident reconstructionists and things like that. That will be very interesting. I think that, at the end of the day, some of the parts that are going to weigh the heaviest are going to be, the physics of biomechanical issues of how certain injuries can develop from certain impacts. We saw a bit of that in the Gwyneth Paltrow ski crash trial, which was so interesting. And I feel like we're going to get a bit more into the weeds in that kind of science in this case as well, to determine is it possible for these injuries to result from a car accident? Is it possible for this to result from a dog bite and a mean uppercut or something like that? You know what I mean? So that is going to weigh very, very heavily in this case. And we haven't gotten anywhere near that. We're still on whether or not Karen Reed made certain admissions and whether or not those admissions should even be listened to if in fact she made them. So yeah, I don't know. I can't tell whether or not the prosecution is still confident in their case, but they are not making that much headway, in my opinion, in this case so far. So, and that may be frustrating to them. So, all right, folks. Oh, here's one more. Keith Tama. Shouldn't the fact that none of the Leo alleged to commit this conspiracy still be on active duty hurt that theory? BPD, MSF, ATF. I don't know, because that hasn't been presented to the jury. So whether it hurts or helps anyone is we can't really say if the jury doesn't have something in front of them about it. But so far, what's been presented to the jury has been very good for the defense and not so great for the prosecution. Okay. All right, folks. I think that is about it for me for today. Time to go work on a recap. Monday is a full court day, according to Judge Canone. So 9 a.m. We got more court. We got more trial, more testimony. So thank you so much to everyone for joining me. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or on recap. Thank you to everybody that is, whether you're lurking or commenting in the comments or in the chat. Folks that have super chatted, thank you so much. Folks that have bought memberships for themselves or for other people, thank you so much. All of that really supports the channel and is very, very helpful. If you guys haven't already, please do like the video before you head out. It does help to sort of push this out to more people so more folks can join us for this crazy, crazy journey. And aside from that, thank you to the mods, as always, for helping to make sure that the discussion is productive and guided in a great way, because folks are agreeing and disagreeing. And poll results. Almost forgot. Thank you. All right. So far, which way are you leaning on KR's guilt/non-guilt for murder at this point? 1.3 thousand votes. 55% said not guilty. 5% said guilty. 38% said not enough information yet. So that is very interesting. It's very interesting. I love tracking how those numbers kind of shift over time. Okay, folks. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, whatever's left of it, or early Saturday for some folks. I know that there are some people on the other side of that date in time. I don't, how do I say that? You know what I mean. Folks in other time zones. Okay, guys, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I hope you have a wonderful, relaxing time this weekend. Recharge your batteries. We got so much more trial to go. Okay, see you guys.